welcome to episode 8 of All Things Armwrestling. All right, Mike, welcome.
I'm here.
I'm so glad that you're here and we could talk about, let's start with how did you get into arm wrestling?
I guess the short version is YouTube and John, our mutual friend.
Really? So talk about YouTube first. I want to hear why.
Well, so I play table tennis, right? And I take lessons every week, and I've been playing with my dad all these years, and it's an indoor sport. So the YouTube algorithm, as everyone's talking about now, it has indoor sports as a topic of interest.
I never would have thought of that as this is indoor.
Yeah,
and it's
just another indoor
categorizes
sport.
It.
Yeah, so it recommends slapping contests too.
Right.
So it's like I'm not going to get involved, right? But I see arm wrestling.
Why not?
And I see schoolboy, and it says, can you beat this schoolboy? And it's in Union Square, right?
Yeah.
And I'm watching this video. I'm like lying in bed at 3 a.m, like we do, right? And I see fucking John.
You're like, I know that guy.
Yeah, and I'm like, I send it to John, like, bro, I saw you on YouTube. And he's like, oh, yeah, I've been arm wrestling for a while. And
so this is in Union Square?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And when I assumed that he had just stumbled upon that accidentally, like he was in the city. And he's like, oh, no, like I went to Union Square because I knew that guy was going to be there.
Right.
And of course, I go back in the video now and I see half the guys from our practice.
Right.
Going against schoolboy, right? Right. So, of course, it's just intriguing seeing this guy just, steamrolling people, right? And all these big, strong guys, and then, of course, you go down the rabbit hole and you see Devin and Larry Wheels and that whole scene. And Khaled, and it's like the whole thing. It's like you go down the YouTube tunnel real quick.
Right.
And then I'm talking to John and he's like, yeah, you should come to arm wrestling practice. And I'm like, yeah, right.
And now stop right there. Why did you have that attitude then when you were like, yeah, right?
I mean, you can't even get me on a bicycle, or to skiing. These kind of things are out of the question.
Activity.
It's less so that it's things that can potentially harm my hands, my fingers.
Okay.
So I'm a guitar player. We're both guitar players that are sensitive about this stuff. We have agile, strong hands.
That's another a thing unique to this episode is we both play guitar.
Yes.
And once I started arm wrestling, I was always wondering, hey, am I ever going to meet another musician or a guitar player?
Right.
And I know what you mean because at first I was never concerned with like hurting my hand or anything. But then when I started to realize some people by accident in certain positions, you'll break a finger, you'll tear your thumb off your hand. Right. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that.
It's less so even like those super traumatic things. It's just like the soreness.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like my arms being
a minor injury and now you can't do stuff.
Yeah. Of course, I'm not in college anymore. I'm not practicing 6-7 hours a day the guitar. And I mean, I practice here and I have to teach and all this, but basically it doesn't take any real effort to play. I play with this low action. Mm-hmm. I go for like minimal exertion. I want to be able to play for 6 hours and make music, not be like bleeding.
Right. Yeah. Something. It should just be like thoughtless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I see less of an impediment from being sore, but I had to find out by coming in the first place to arm wrestling practice. And
so you're like, fuck no, I'm not doing that because I don't want to mess up my hands. So then what happened that changed your mind?
I came to the practice. And I was like, what the hell? Before that, I'd never been to a gym before. I've never lifted a weight before,
Right.
And John's my friend, and like we're always talking about cosmology and psychology and different and music and stuff like this. And the one thing and I've had these knee problems, and John's trying to help me with that, and he's like, "Dude, you have to lift up heavy weights." And I'm like, "What? That makes no sense."
Right?
If my knee hurts.
It's going to hurt more now.
It's going to hurt more if I lift. He's like, that's not how it works. You need to get stronger.
Right.
This is all very foreign to me, the idea of getting stronger.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to come to arm wrestling. And, that first time. And I'm like, this is going to be a bad idea. I'm going to be fucking regret this immediately, right? Of course, it's a fun hang. And it's like I'm by far the weakest dude in the room the first time, right? And it's like, and John shows me some basic, like row back, stay posted up and stay risen and, cup your wrist and the things that, now you just kind of do without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Or at least most of the time. And I was like, this is fascinating. This isn't just like, a bunch of like mouth breathing psychos, tearing each other's arms off.
Yeah.
This isn't like Chewbacca. This is like a bunch of like civilized, nice, thoughtful people.
Which is funny because it could have been the other way, because there are places where you'll go to practice and you will be like, I'm never doing this again.
That's part of the reason I've avoided gym kind of culture and all this, because it's a bunch of guys that I just have nothing in common. It's like, this isn't my scene.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Meatheads.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even athletics. I'm not a natural athlete. I mean, I like my table tennis and all this. And again, I was terrible at table tennis until I started actually moving my feet. You have to move your feet. You have to, your footwork has to be on point. So it's like, you have to start really exerting it once you want to get better. And it's the same thing with this. It's not just like, oh, I can just be a strong motherfucker. It's like, no, you got to get your shit together. And that's what I liked about it. I was like, oh, this is more than just who has the biggest arms and who's the strongest, tallest, whatever. It's like, oh, this is really fascinating. And John is really welcoming, and you're super welcoming in this whole thing. So that was a lot of it too. It's just like not feeling like I'm overwhelmed with like, I don't know what's happening here. Just getting comfortable. And yeah, I mean, now it's it's addictive. Of course, I couldn't move my arm for 2 weeks after that first one. And I had a gig the following week, and I was like, oh,
how did that work out? How sore were you the next week?
It sucked. I mean, and it was a duo gig with a cellist. So I'm playing all this, it's like pop tunes and this kind of, it was like a wedding gig.
So you're feeling a lot in the supination?
Exactly. So I'm like in like this the whole time, and it's like, oh, my fucking arm is hurting.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't like this. But I don't know, for some reason I'm at this point in my life where I'm like, life is too long to not take any risks and have some fun, and feel some pain, I guess, right? So came back the following week and better, And then the following week, it's like, all right, now I can walk up to the table. I know where to put my feet. I know how to grip up a little better than I did the first time. The first time it's like, whoa, there's a lot of shit here involved just in walking up to the table. You don't even know which way to put the pad the first time, but now it's like, oh yeah. So just the comfortability of just being at the table and just doing it every week, that was the biggest thing, just to feeling more at home at the thing,
Yeah, I have a lot to say about just what you just said, which is like just the beginning, right? So the beauty of that is, like, I watched you go through that. And when I met you, it was like, okay, day one is always, okay, this guy's never done it before. Today's his first day. That's all it is. When I meet somebody and they've never been on a table, at the end of that practice, you're still the day one guy. And I'm like, I hope this guy comes again to know what it's like when he's not day one guy anymore, because it already changes on day two, which is usually a week later or 2 weeks later. And I like to tell guys who come on day one that most likely, because of what you do on day one, what happens is you might be sore for a whole week or 2 weeks, depending upon how hard you went today. So another thing that I tell guys when they're there is, you're here today, you've never done this before, please don't try to go 100%, because when you go 100%, you'll strain yourself so much that for 2 weeks you'll be in pain. But if you try hard enough and you know that you didn't go 100% to, like, I don't know, prove something to yourself,
right,
you'll probably not be sore for 2 weeks. So that helps, because there are guys that come here on day one, and then I ask them on day two what's going on, and I say, hey, how sore were you? And they're like, oh, it was pretty good. Like, it's like I was sore for like 3 days, and then it was fine. And I'm like, oh wow, that is interesting, because I'm like, that's not the norm, you know?
Right.
So then the interesting thing about you is there are tons of people out there like you who are like, not only do I play guitar and I don't want to mess up my hands and I don't want to hurt for what I'm doing the rest of the week and all this stuff, I also am not a physical person in general, like an athlete type person. So arm wrestling, that sounds stupid to me. That's most people. Or they're like, or what is that? So somewhere between this sounds stupid to me and what is that, people have to navigate past that when they hear about it. And then here you are. You're like, oh shit, this thing is incredibly intricate and complex and intriguing in so many ways. And it's funny, some people just don't see it that way. And it's not because arm wrestling isn't fun and intriguing. Some people can't approach it that way because they just don't see the interesting aspect of it. So you have that on your side where it's interesting to you.
Yeah. I mean, part of it also is that I think I have some kind of gravity to the fringe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Whether, I mean, I'm wearing an Imperial Triumphant t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm going to see Vienna Philharmonic tonight wearing an Imperial Triumphant t-shirt. It's like, this shit's weird.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to arm wrestling practice and I'm playing table tennis.
Weird is good.
You know, it's why play baseball? Everyone's already doing that already. I did that in elementary school. It's like, that's fine. Great. But I don't know. I have this attraction to these weird things, you know? I don't know if it's the people that also like weird things that I like or the weird thing itself. But it's a combination, right?
Now why is this weird? Let's start there.
Well, I mean, it's not an Olympic sport. There's 3 or 4 different leagues, 4 or 5 leagues that all disagree about fundamental shit, right? It hasn't been totally figured out. It's not like MLB, right? Table tennis has the ITTF,
okay,
you know. And
let's not get into why it's not an Olympic sport, and let's not get into the different leagues.
Right.
Let's assume it is an Olympic sport somehow, and there was one league. Why is it weird after that?
I think it would be less weird at that point.
Oh yeah, why?
Because
the weirdness is just.
I think there's too much. It's too vague. When people say arm wrestling, first of all, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. They think you're talking about, you know, the sitting down on a wide table, right? And with no pads or anything like that, and you're in a lunchroom.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Or they think it's like the scene in whatever the movie is with Stallone.
Yeah, over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I've never seen.
Yeah, you need to see it. Because once you see it, it changes your whole perspective of what is that movie with Stallone. Right. And then you have to see that movie every year.
Right. Yeah.
Which sounds
that's
crazy.
The thing. It's like ping pong is weird too. Like people think it's just the thing that your dad has in the basement. You play with him, you know, and you
but we all know what the fuck that is.
But then people are like,
and it's an Olympic sport.
Table tennis, I know they stand really far from the table and it's an Olympic sport.
So let me stop you there. So ping pong is an Olympic sport.
Right.
And as far as rules and leagues, you don't have to worry about that, right? Because it's just like, this is what it is.
Very standardized.
So therefore, is it weird?
That's the thing. It's weird, but it's less weird because people still know that there is real ping pong table tennis, right?
Okay.
With arm wrestling, it's like there's arm space wrestling.
Okay.
And then
so you're saying it's weird because it needs accreditation and validation.
Yeah, because then people they would just accidentally come across it. It's like we know that UFC is a very serious thing, right? Even I'm going to stay away with a 100-foot pole, right?
Right.
But I know that it's a very serious thing. It's like if someone says I do UFC, I do, you know, UFC fighting. Say, okay, that's crazy and it's weird, but I know that like that's a thing. Yeah. With arm wrestling, they don't even know that it exists as a real sport.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think if it did have some kind of more encompassing international overseeing, then people would say, oh, I know that's that sport, arm wrestling.
So I have a lot of questions from here. This is really interesting to me about the weirdness. But before I get into that part, let's talk about what your opinion is. If you've ever thought about it or not, I don't know. But like, what do you think arm wrestling's problem is that it can't get it together in that validation and like stop being weird because it's not like an Olympic sport and all these problems. Like there's something that's like, is it just not famous enough, popular enough? Is that what happened?
You know, I don't know because it's currently in this
trend,
state
really,
of
right?
Like super acceleration.
Right.
I mean, with guys like Devin and Larry Wheels propelling the sport, like they're lighting it on fire. It's unbelievable, you know? And Schoolboy's brother, right? I mean, it's like the YouTube channels have all these subscribers. People are watching millions of views on these things. So I think that's all good. Like that's what needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what's wrong with it. It's
like what does it need? That's really my question. What is the missing element to move it over?
I think it needs. I think that someone that is manufacturing tables to just have them installed at every fucking gym.
Yeah, it's like the Apple iMac
exactly
thing.
Yeah. And it's like Sriracha. They never had an advertising campaign. They they just gave it to every restaurant.
We shouldn't know what Sriracha is,
right?
But we do.
Yeah.
Why?
So imagine if whatever company or whatever kind of situation wants to install arm wrestling table at every Equinox gym and every Blink gym and every independent gym. And it's like, here's an arm wrestling table. This is another way to increase strength in your upper body.
I agree. That's a really good idea. So now if I had the money to do that, the first thing that I'm thinking is, okay, liability issues. How do you get around the fact that it's also very dangerous if you're just going to say, hey, everybody.
500 pounds off the ground, right?
Well, there's two things with that. When you go to a gym, let's say, because that's really what you're talking about. Every numbnuts that joins the gym in January can hurt themselves, but chances are they won't, because they won't push themselves or they won't know what they're doing and they'll just do some dumb little thing. But on the arm wrestling table, most likely a noob trying real hard can break their arm.
Right. Yeah.
So like now it's a new problem that Sriracha sauce doesn't have.
Right.
So then how do you solve that? Is it just education?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with music. How do you get people to get involved with music? Teach them about it, But like I'm not worried about danger when I start music, right? Right.
So then there's a danger element, right?
Yeah.
In arm wrestling. And it's not like a danger where you're like, oh, it's probably more dangerous to drive a car every day, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, why aren't you dying in a car every day? It's because you have to get a license first, right? So,
and there are stop signs at every intersection.
Oh,
You have to follow the rules.
So the thing is, you install a table, you need something that keeps people safe if they're going to be on it.
Yeah.
And that's education.
Right.
That's, what's the word? Oversight or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even when you buy the table, it says like Devin on the bottom, he has to write, you can't hold me responsible for your arm breaking on my table.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess put a little sign in the corner of the table that says, like, don't hurt yourself. Be careful.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, obviously that's ridiculous, but something along those lines. It's like, you be careful and
you know what it is? I just had a funny idea. Like we were talking about video games earlier. When I was a kid, there were places like everywhere with arcade games. There was like an arcade joint near my house. Every place that sold like sandwiches and pizza had an arcade, maybe 3, and a pinball machine in there. Totally. I'm wondering now. So now we've got LCD screens everywhere instead of billboards. So the table that you install everywhere has a screen, a cheap screen like this that costs $100
with like a
video on it that's on loop.
Yeah.
So before you play here, this is what you got to know.
Dig.
That's an idea.
Yeah. And it just says like, start with just doing like this.
Yeah. Never do this.
Yeah. Don't try going side. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then show this is what happens. And then, it's like, oh, okay.
But then imagine like, you go down to, buy some meth from some fucking drug dealer, and he has like a little tutorial. He says like, be careful, don't get addicted to this, don't take too much of it. It's like people aren't going to get into arm wrestling because they want to be careful, right? They want to get in because they want to feel strong and powerful and dominating, right? And then of course they're going to be disappointed when like emo shows up and he's steamrolling you and he weighs 130 pounds. But
yeah, but like that's what it is. I feel like there are little impediments that aren't figured out about arm wrestling. Because like table tennis, what are the dangers?
I mean, there's no real danger. Everyone gets injured, you can roll your ankle.
Right. There you go. That's the danger.
What you can do walking on the sidewalk,
One of our guys that was here recently, Eric is his name. He was here twice. He was into gymnastics.
Right.
destroyed his right wrist.
Oh fuck!
That's
I saw
dangerous.
his wrist. Yeah.
Still needs another surgery.
Oh God! Did you see that scar?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it was his left wrist that's destroyed. So he only pulled right arm.
right.
So he's like,
Yes,
I want to try arm wrestling.
Yeah.
And we all had to ask him, what happened to your left wrist? And he
yeah.
kept telling us, and it was like, okay, that sounds horrible.
Yeah, and he described the whole thing. It's
Yeah.
like, absolutely awful.
Yeah. And
But
he's like, it's rare, but it happens.
But you can't just go into a gymnastics gym alone.
Mhm.
Like, there's going to be coaches everywhere, you know, pros. And you have to get into the outfit. You can't just go in with your jeans and start flipping around. You
Right,
know?
there you go.
There's a whole other thing, you know. And table tennis too, for that matter. Like, they don't let you, like, if you're taking lessons, they don't let you play in running shoes
Yeah.
because you're going to topple over. You need
Flat.
you need flat, really supportive shoes,
Uh-huh.
right? Because you're shuffling left and right constantly, right?
So is there a shoe brand and model recommended for table
all
tennis?
the table tennis, all those brands make shoes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they make these super flat, and the balls of your feet like start to sting because you're on like this.
Mhm.
But yeah, you need to wear the correct shoes to play, you know, and yeah, the rules with the rackets and all this stuff. But it, like you said, there's not a risk of breaking your leg if you wear the wrong shoes,
Mhm.
you know. So, but yeah, there is a sense of people looking out for you. But it's like that with arm wrestling too. I think that's the main thing. It's like these practices,
absolutely.
having, you know,
Even
a
more
group
so,
of
I
guys.
think.
You know?
Yeah. So let's get away from that. Let's get now. Okay, let's just assume, you know how not to hurt yourself.
Mhm.
You've been arm wrestling for, let's say, a month or two.
Mhm.
You're still a noob. You're still going through the growing pains.
Right.
You're just like an average person. You're not like a gifted beast, right?
Right.
So why is it weird still? Now you're past that stuff. You're just arm wrestling, and all your friends who don't arm wrestle,
Yeah.
whatever. You're now the only people you talk arm wrestling with are the other arm wrestling people.
Yeah.
It's weird still, right? Why is it weird?
Because it's still just you.
Uh-huh.
It's still not all your friends, you know? But it's gradually becoming less and less weird. I mean, craft beer was weird when I got into it.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like 2005 when I was in high school.
Mhm.
You know, I'm like, my dad's taking me to the grocery store and he's buying me all this fucking crazy IPAs and imperial stouts and all this
Right.
stuff. And it's like, it was weird. You know, everyone else is drinking terrible beer.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a
And-
taste thing too.
Exactly. Then it spreads like wildfire. And
Mm.
now craft beer is like totally ubiquitous. At a Yankee game, you're drinking like Goose Island.
Yeah,
know?
you're fucking like not with it if you're drinking Coors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of time. It's that it just shifts from weird to totally normal.
Uh-huh.
You know,
So there is a shift where eventually it's not weird for you.
or at all.
Uh-huh.
The average person will just be like, "Oh, cool, you do arm wrestling.
Yeah.
I play tennis."
Uh-huh.
That'll happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah,
The internet
'cause
is certainly, it's all being done
I've
correctly.
played
if you ask
tennis.
me.
Look, let's go to there for a second. I've played tennis as a kid because tennis is like normal. Like,
Right.
Tennis is like, yeah, play tennis
It's
if
the
you
definition
want.
of normal.
But
It's what
like-
you do at a country club.
But it's not normal if you you don't have any money. You can't get to a park that has tennis courts. You can't afford the equipment. You don't have the proper mentorship.
Right.
You can't go to tennis camp. So there's a lot of reasons why it's totally not normal.
yeah, exactly.
Yet I've played fucking tennis. All right.
Right.
And then the amount that I've played tennis, it's still fucking weird to me. So, okay. It's like, so is arm wrestling really that weird? I guess not. It's
Yeah.
really not.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not in the societal norms. That's what it is historically.
Right. Right.
But it is for a whole bunch of people. Like when you talk to these people, like Bob Brown and all these people, Eric Rusin, all these people that have been around and maybe don't even arm wrestle anymore.
yeah.
And they talk about it on like The Fix with Neil Pickup and stuff like that. I mean, it's not weird to them.
Exactly.
To them,
Yeah,
they're like, you're weird if you're not arm wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still consider myself in the arm wrestling is weird phase because I've only been doing it seriously for like 15 months.
Right.
And I'm still learning the strength curves,
Mm-hmm.
the what do you call it? The practice frequency to keep improving.
Yeah.
The physical debilitation recovery, things like that. And it's all good because it's still just an upward slope.
Totally.
Like the stock market since like the last crash in 1929. It just keeps going up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, okay, so always gaining, right? And I'm always like, okay, well, don't get ahead of yourself and don't end up in a crash somewhere where you can't recover for a while. Just don't be careful. Don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And keep gaining. And then don't get greedy. Don't try to go too far too fast because then that's where the problems are going to happen,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
And the reason why is because I'm a little older now, so I have the mentality to slow down. But it's like when I started this thing, I was like, all right, I suck at this, right? And I'm gonna suck at this. But believe it or not, I will get better. And I'm not like 20 years old. So that's an interesting, okay, so just trust that you'll get better. And it's going to take 3 years.
Right.
So put those fucking 3 years in. So then it's like, okay, so you got to pace yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what you have to know, no matter who you are.
Totally. Well, and that's the thing. It's all my guitar students are, I have to tell them that. It's like, you're not going to learn this shit in 6 months. It's going to take years and you got to be patient.
Forget arm wrestling. You want to play guitar? You better wait those 3 years of playing constantly with passion. Like you said, 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
For 3 years. Otherwise, you're not going to play guitar.
Yeah. And they're going to be disappointed because they're not.
Yeah.
They have some ridiculous expectation.
Yeah.
But that's what's crazy about arm wrestling and I guess strength things in general. Is that, I mean, the raw talent someone has is a little bit more conspicuous, you know? Like if someone is extremely strong, they look extremely strong most of the time.
Right.
Right? If someone is some kind of like transcendental genius and they can, solve the quantum mechanics and cosmology problem, it's like it doesn't show in the size of their wrist.
Yeah,
right?
you're gonna.
Like it's in their brain, and you can't tell if someone's a chess genius until they start playing chess. But you can tell, like, oh, that dude. If you grip up, so you feel his hand, shake his hands, like that dude's probably going to be pretty good at arm wrestling just out of the box, right? So, and that's what I think is actually kind of scary because people that are super strong, they're the ones that can get really, really aggressive early on and hurt themselves because they're relying on that raw strength and then they're tearing their tendons apart.
Yeah.
And like what, there's a guy who comes and he's one of the most raw, strong dudes in the room. And it's like, he's like, I can't come next week. It's like, it hurts so bad.
Yeah. And how do you explain to that guy
and
why?
I'm like, dude, I'm like half as strong as you and I'm pulling twice as much as you in practice. And I'm fine after a few days. But then again, it's like, I'm really thinking about this. I think there's a certain amount of just thinking you have to do. It's like, all right, I'm going to take my Animal Flex pills every day. And I'm going to take luckily I got 3 more pills of meloxicam for my knees, the painkiller. It's like ibuprofen on crack.
How are your knees doing since the training, by the way?
Better. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. We were early on.
And is it because it's simply because your quads are getting stronger?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just doing deadlifts with John. Yeah. Never felt bad. I mean, and the ping pong too. On Thursdays. So the gym is on Monday, ping pong's on Thursday, and your legs are they're just annihilated between those two things. Not the weightlifting is understandable, but during an hour and a half of drills on the tennis table, it's like your legs are shot to hell.
Right.
I want to bring John to take a lesson with my coach, so he can just see like how crazy it is on your legs. But
he's got to be light on his feet.
Yeah. You're shuffling around. It's all these little micro movements,
Yeah.
But what was it? What were we on?
We were talking about strong guys hurting.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, since I'm not this naturally strong cat, I've got to like really think about this. I've got to try to put all the pieces together. Can't rely on any kind of raw talent, raw strength, right? have to think about all this from square one.
So that's the other thing that makes it weird for noobs. So you come in, you don't know what arm wrestling is, you think it's weird. So you know why? It's because there's so much to learn about arm wrestling that you think that there isn't anything to learn. And on day one, you're going to lose and you go, that's not for me. But like a perfect example of why that's not a thing is one of the things that we spoke about weeks into it is your ability to perform ulnar deviation, for example. So riser, right? And you talked about how you have no riser in your wrist in terms of mobility. Yeah. And then
Misha's demonstrating just like he's like 20 degrees further than this. And I'm like, dude, my bones are there. It's not going to go.
So before you think that, oh, I'm not strong, I don't have it for, there's all these guys, this is stupid. It's like a dick measuring contest. It's like, no, it's really not that. Yeah. It's like, why don't you learn the biomechanics?
Yeah.
And then understand what muscles you have to use in your hands and your forearms, which, by the way, there's so many muscles in there that you don't even know about that you're using every day just to move a door handle.
Right.
Like menial tasks, So think of arm wrestling as like a really focused menial task.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, so there's specific components that I have to focus on in strength. And that's what keeps arm wrestling interesting to me. So when I first started this thing, I was interested. Now that I think back, it's almost been so long and such a long journey of interest that I don't even know why I started it. Because honestly, I'm like the person that I was when I didn't know anything about it and was interested in it. I was kind of like, why was I interested in it? Because you didn't know anything. You knew you were weak, but the real answer as to why I was interested in it is like what you said. So people get into it because of YouTube. And it's not like YouTube did it. It's the fact that people like Devin started to explain technical mastery.
Absolutely. Yes.
So once you realize that if you're a gorilla, you'll rip someone's arm off, so you'll win.
Right.
The thing is, but if you're not a gorilla and you have technical mastery, you'll win. So then you're like, wait, so I have a chance if I'm smart about this, and I do the long game.
That's the fun shit.
Now you're into it.
Yeah. Well, and that's like what we do as guitar players.
Right.
It's like we're thinking about the smallest little shit, like, how to shift and what's the most efficient way to get from here to here. And the angle of the pick, we're talking about like, the most minute shit. And it's like, this is like what we're doing here. It's like, you're in this position, cut more. Oh, come here, feel this part of the bone. It's like, whoa, this is getting deep. And it's so multifaceted and multi-leveled too. There's inside, outside, there's a high hook, there's a low hook, there's this, that. And it's like, this starts really getting like chess. That's what I'm attracted to for sure. Because like like it's abundantly clear, I don't have this attraction to it because I'm a naturally strong guy or coming from a weight training background, which still most guys that get into it are coming from some experience with lifting weights, right? Because they're strong, right? And this is a strength sport. It's not only technical, right? You need technique, but you have to be strong or else you're just screwed, right?
Ultimately, it's a strength sport. So what it means is even if you're not strong, what happens is the time that you spend learning arm wrestling, you get strong.
You get stronger.
So you're like, it's like guitar playing. It's like, okay, so when I start playing guitar, because I'm a young kid and I start taking lessons, and so the first 10 lessons of guitar are kind of demeaning if you want too much too fast. And then you realize this is going to take a really long time. And then you have to decide, well, at the very least, I'll learn how to play my favorite songs and I'll be able to entertain at a party if I want to.
Sure.
And at the very most, I'll have a deep understanding of music and I will have this unbelievable ability to do something like compose and become whatever, a musician in my own right and things like that.
And do it with other people.
So that's what arm wrestling is that you don't come to the table on day one being able to do that, being strong, but you get strong along the way. So that's the other thing that keeps me coming. Like when I first got up on a table, I realized Oh, everyone with a super strong wrist that I know and a super massive strong hand and fingers, I have no chance with, and I'm going to lose every day. But I'm still doing it because it's not about winning. I have to be fine with losing. Totally. So now my ego is like, has to be healthy.
Totally.
Because if if you can't deal with the ego thing, guess what? You're not coming back.
No doubt. Yeah,
and you know what? Yeah. What I like about that is, cool. We actually don't want to deal with those people because in life, those are the people that are going to be a problem, right? So it's in a way, arm wrestling is an equalizer.
Totally. One of the first things I heard Yuva say, because I mean, if people are listening, they don't know who he's one of the stronger dudes.
Yeah, so when Yuva comes here, and he's been here like a good handful of 5 times, let's say, every time he comes here, doesn't come here often. Right. He's one of the guys of the many guys that we'd like to mention. But Yuva, since we're talking about him, holy shit, thank you for coming. We honor you. You're a fucking strong motherfucker. Yeah. You teach us all kinds of stuff. You're an awesome dude. But you were going to say...
Well, so one of the first I heard him say is, he's holding somebody like this, and it's a strong dude, that hadn't pulled Yuva before. Yeah. And I'm looking at this like, oh, shit, that dude's like a freaking pillar, right? And he takes him down, top rolls him, and the guy's like, oh, the other dude's like, holy shit, like, you're unbelievable. And he was like, no, that people beat me doing the same thing. And I was like, oh. He's like, yeah, I beat you doing that. People beat me doing that.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's great. I was like, this guy's he knows where it's at. He's in the middle. It's like, there's up here, there's down here. We're all doing this together. It's like, you can beat people doing that too.
I'll give you another example of that. So like some people are sometimes on the sidelines at practice and, you think that they keep coming to practice and they understand that it's not about winning and losing, but every now and then they get lost and you could see that they're like, I want to win. And they do their thing that they're good at, which is good. You need your lane or whatever, your winning lane, as they say. And you want to keep improving that so you can keep winning. But you also want to improve on your weaknesses. So I'll see guys on the sidelines watching Yuva, and Yuva's training someone. Yeah. But they're not talking. And Yuva's giving him everything.
Yes.
And there's a guy on the sidelines looking at this. And I'm like, oh shit, Yuva's really training this guy and learning what he's good at while he's training him and giving him everything.
Right.
And they're having a rapport because they're arm wrestlers together right now. And they're both in their element. Yeah. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's why we're here. That's why I have this practice.
Yes.
And then there's a guy on the sidelines right across from me thinking,
this is a match.
He's like, holy shit, Yuva's losing.
Right.
And that guy is so good that he's beating him. I wonder why Yuva won't try something else.
Yeah.
So he won't lose. I'm like, holy shit, you were really thinking that?
Yeah. It's like, far, yeah.
And it's so weird how that's a thing, Yeah. And it's like when you and I can watch something happen and then we'll go home and we'll tell totally different stories.
Right.
Because in our minds we imagined a different scenario.
Yeah.
But there's only one objective truth, Yeah. So arm wrestling can get in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's when it becomes a competition versus a workout, those are different things. And you have to learn how to do both those things. Like you have to do the practice, but you also, if you're going to enter a tournament, this isn't going to be practice anymore. Like we all know, it's like light speed, first of all. It's just an entirely different skill set. Being able to have a ready go and do all these things properly. Like I'm not even hip to all that shit. I'm just trying to get a little bit stronger and get the technique together and get stronger and use this as like a vehicle to learn a new thing and get stronger and all those things, right? I would say it's safe to say I'm never going to enter an arm wrestling tournament. Mm-hmm. I'd say it's a pretty safe bet. Not a guarantee. I guess it's possible, right?
It's a healthy attitude.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If the only goal is that competition, then there's a way to do that. I guess approach it like that all the time, and like that's the goal.
Well, at least you know your place too,
right?
Because there's guys who are so strong, and maybe they know their place. Maybe they're a little off, and they're so strong that as soon as they start arm wrestling, they enter the first tournament they can.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they do all right, and I'm just like, that's not me.
Right. Yeah.
So at least I know, but at the same time, you can enter a tournament for different reasons. Like I can be like, I just want the experience of the tournament. I don't expect anything to happen. I just want to feel what it feels like to lose against people in tournaments so I could learn, because that's really what it is too. Because at practice, new guys come and they're strong new guys, right? Yeah. And I have to meet them and see how strong they are, and once again deal with where my weaknesses are. So what the cool thing is that I want to grip up with all the new strong guys.
Yeah.
Because I haven't felt that yet, and every time it's new.
Yeah.
And once you just do it, you don't want to go nuts and like be like hogging the table with the guy. But what I'm saying is, you'll pull at least a few right and left, right? And you'll get a feel for that guy. And you're like, yeah, I have no chance. But holy shit, the way we pulled. And, the other thing is guys like that, they have to give you some and watch you play. And then they're like, okay, now I'm taking you down. Yes, so are you ready? And it's also like this thing where it's like, so are you ready? Because it's coming.
You're right.
And they got to take you down. Yeah. So there are all these nuances to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It's kind of sexy. That, like you said, the nuances. For me, when it's 90% of the time, I'm in a situation where I'm the weaker dude, right?
Sure.
But then that other 10% where you are the stronger guy is like, okay, this is an entirely different situation. Now I'm like the Yuva of the table right now, which is a different mindset. That's actually when your ego truly disappears. It's kind of like, this isn't about me. This is about this guy getting stronger, right? And at a certain point, it's like, yeah, the guy has no chance against me.
Well, so fine. Let's talk about that real quick, though.
Fun,
What I like about you saying that, it's like, you're like, I'm the guy that comes in here and loses all the time. Yeah. But then there's times where that doesn't happen. So you know what that is? That's your payoff. So like you came in here because you're like, oh, there's a technical strategy to this. And then it's not always that you're the stronger guy. It's that your technical strategy beats that guy's weakness. Yeah. That's a technical weakness.
Sure.
And it's you just learned the thing that you're
it's
like,
working.
This is the thing.
Right.
And you're like, look at that. I don't even have to try hard. It's just working.
Yes.
And then you're like, holy shit, if everyone understood that it's not, you're shaking and you're sweating and your bones about to break. No. It's finding the simplest route through the keyhole.
Right. Yeah. And accessing that and realizing that is so fun. That's like, oh, it worked. And I love it. And what always happens is everyone around the table notices too.
Right.
They're like, that was beautiful what you just did. Like you did what you've been trying to work on.
Right.
And it's like everyone's smiling. It's like, oh shit, that was great. It's on camera. You cut out the music for a second. When Misha noticed I finally like cupped.
Exactly. He was like, yo, did you see that?
He was like, watch that in the video. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that was great.
Right.
Of course, then it's like the next week. Well, that was 2 weeks ago. So then, last night, was it last night? 2 nights ago. I'm like not accessing any of the top roll. It's like not there. Right. And that's actually an interesting point that I think we was going to come up anyway. The frequency of practice versus, at what stage you are, if you're a beginner, if you've been doing this for 20 years, how often are you practicing? And I was thinking last night, I'm like lying in bed, I'm like, it's the 7-day problem. That's what it is. It's like once a week. 7 days is an arbitrary fucking number. It means nothing in reality or biologically, right?
Right.
Nothing. Like 10 also means nothing.
Right.
It's just we have 10 fingers. Base 10 is the only reason. So thinking, okay, so that 7-day thing is either too long or too short. Right? It's never like the Goldilocks just right. And what if it's like we practice every 10 days? Then it's like you're slightly more recovered, but you're not going 14 days without it. Because then it's kind of like you forgot the shit that you accessed, that you finally figured out. Now it's not there 2 weeks later. A week later it is, but you're still fucking sore. So,
right.
So I'm thinking like, oh, what if like 9 days is the exact perfect, like every 9 days you arm wrestle? obviously, you know.
Mm-hmm. And for some people, it's 5.
Exactly. There were 4.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, shit. Like, what is the thing? So that's what I noticed 2 nights ago. I was like, man, I forgot some of the shit that I finally figured out 2 weeks ago. I'm well rested.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I'm not in as much pain, but I forgot because now I'm still such a beginner.
So now
you got to have that consistency.
So now it's the computer.
Yeah.
Is not accessing the data.
Right. Yeah.
So now somebody has to remind you.
Yes, I'm still in that stage where it's when you're a beginner, you need to constantly remind yourself of the shit that you're figuring out. It's not intuition yet. It's not like there, you know?
I'll give you another really great example of that. So weeks ago, Constantine hadn't been here for like 5 weeks or something.
Right.
Because he was on vacation and this and that. And then when he came here, he forgot a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But luckily, he was like the first one here, and me and him were kind of talking, catching up a little bit, and we were talking about arm wrestling philosophically. And I was, still in it. Like, I'm like, yeah, I've been preparing for practice, whatever. My mind's in it.
Yeah.
His mind is in it too, but his mind is like, oh, shit, practice. I've been busy. I'm scattered, whatever. This is going to be so much fun is all he's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So we grip up real quick. No one gets here yet. And we're just kind of pulling a little bit. And he's like so excited. I want to try this. I want to try that. And then he looks at me and he's like, fuck, why are you so fucking strong? And I was like, no, I'm not. I was like, it's only been a few weeks. I was like, I'm not. Maybe I'm a little bit stronger. But
yeah.
I was like, dude, you and I are always neck and neck. And I was like, dude, you're super strong. I was like, dude, you're 100% sinew, and like you're so like whatever, like he's just super strong, and like you grip up with him, and everything is painful to grab onto. You know what I mean?
Fingers are so annoying.
So I'm like, I was like, you know what? I was like, no, it's not that I'm strong. I was like, here. I was like, watch this. So I was like, you know why you think I'm strong? It's because you're pushing against me in the place where I'm strong.
Yeah.
And I said, you know why you're being defeated right now, supposedly so easy? Is because I'm avoiding you. And I said to him, remember, arm wrestling is not going where the person is strong.
Right.
It's running around their strength and getting them where they're weak. Right. And let me tell you, he looked at me and he was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then he did it. He literally did that.
And of course, he already knew that.
I didn't have to explain to him how to do it. Right. He just did what that meant.
Right.
And he was like,
yeah.
And he kept beating me. And I was like, you see?
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, dude, I forgot how to arm wrestle.
Yeah. Yeah.
I fucking forgot how to arm wrestle. He's like, I can't get away from it that long. And I was like, you see, it's not that you can't do it. It's like you forgot what you're supposed to do. And
yeah.
Like,
Well, that's the thing. It's like, what do they say? With 10,000 hours of practice, you're a master or some shit.
Right.
And it's like a lot of weeks of arm wrestling. You can't fucking do arm wrestling for 10 hours a day.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
But that number's obviously bullshit. But at what point when you feel that sense of mastery, that's the goal to me. It's not even winning a competition or entering competition or killing, or arm wrestling my dad. For the record, my dad would be the worst arm wrestler ever.
Yeah.
And I could beat my dad arm wrestling when I was 6. So this is not the goal.
That's saying
I know it's a lot of guys' goals. I got to beat my dad. But my dad's not a firefighter. He's a violinist.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but there's always like the sense of like, oh, I want to be that guy that people are surprised that I can beat them at arm wrestling.
Uh-huh.
That's an interesting kind of idea, right? People are like, oh, Mike's not like this strong weightlifter guy, but he just fucking crushed the room at arm wrestling. That's an interesting kind of idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's surface level, right? For me, it's really just feeling like I know how to do this properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every week it gets better. But that's what I'm seeking out is like, I want to be that's like, I feel like I've mastered this thing at my level, right? Doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily beat someone else who hasn't mastered it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they might just be stronger and blah, 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 right? But to feel like that sense of mastery, like I'm not lost. right? That's what I'm seeking out.
So it's like a mental confidence is really what you're talking about, while knowing that you have the physicality to back it up.
It's also there's an element of honesty to it too. It's like most of the time, the honesty is going to have to be like, yeah, I'm not a master of this. I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing compared to someone who is a master.
Right.
Right. But then just to be able to honestly say, I feel like I'm pretty masterful at this thing.
Well, let me give you a different. Let me give you a different example of exactly what you're talking about. I think. Okay. So this, you may debate me on this, or you may agree. You're learning how to deadlift, so you know what I'm talking about when I say there's a technical aspect to deadlifting.
Right.
Right. So you can be a master at deadlifting if, let's say, I'm just going to put this out there. You learn the 5 things that you need to master technically about the deadlift, right? The 5 steps.
Okay.
And you can master deadlifting by deadlifting 135 pounds.
Yeah, totally.
And you don't have to master deadlifting at 500 pounds.
Yes.
But you have a goal while you've mastered deadlifting at 135 to keep on going. But then, because when you can't lift 200, let's say, or you can't lift 300, now you have to master that lift at 300. And it's going to be a combination between strength and technique, because you're going to require the strength to lift 300, but you're also going to need to adjust the technique with the strength to lift 300.
Yeah.
But you mastered the technique already at a lower weight. So the mastery is kind of like always a balance between the strength and the technical aspect. And
I think that for me, the definition of mastering something is doing something at the highest level that you're capable of doing. Right. So if you're capable of lifting 250 pounds off the ground, then doing that 250 correctly is the masterful thing.
Right.
If you're lifting 130 pounds when you have the ability to lift 250, then you're just doing it correctly, but it's not masterful.
Well, that's your warm up.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that's the idea of Kenny Werner wrote this book called Effortless Mastery. I just remember this shit.
Okay.
Yeah, this was big in jazz school. He's a brilliant jazz pianist. And this idea of approaching making music or arm wrestling or playing tennis. Inner Tennis is a great book about this shit too. Timothy Galway. That shit's unbelievable. We could be applying this shit to arm wrestling.
Wow, so it's a philosophical thing.
Yeah, totally. Inner tennis, meaning not just tennis, but the game of you suck, I'm great. You suck, I'm great in your brain, right? This ping pong match in your brain of like the ego, I'm great, or like, oh, this is terrible, I'm terrible, I'm never going to get better, right? That match is going on, and that's happening in arm wrestling too. But also this little game of technical versus just like raw strength versus, and then the work versus the talent, right? All this stuff, and accessing shit that you can do naturally by getting rid of useless crap that is filling in all this shit with ego, right? And technique sometimes too. Like, forget about technique. Just do what feels good. Like when you teach a kid to swing a baseball bat, you just say, swing the bat.
Hit the ball.
Yeah. Throw the ball. And they do it with, their perfect technique, right? And if it goes, but that's the thing. We've evolved to throw balls. We haven't evolved to play the violin.
Right.
That's an extremely awkward, strange thing. But like, we've evolved to throw objects to each other.
Right.
Right. And to grip, things. Interesting. I wonder why arm wrestling, maybe it's like something we'd like to do. It's like, this is like very primal. It's like we're gripping up another human being's hand.
It may be evolutionary.
Yeah.
Right.
There's something evolutionarily sound about arm wrestling. It's like, okay, so we're gripping up another human being's hand, right? It's the same as ours. 99.99999% of it is identical. We have the same bones, fingernails, the whole thing. But it's like, and genetically, we're all, essentially the same thing, right? indistinguishable to some alien race, right? So we're doing the same thing. It's like, oh, we're actually part of the same project here. I like that there's this, like, we're holding hands here. You know, we're not like hitting a ball with a rubber fucking thing glued to a wood bat. You know, it's like, this is just like you and me.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. Like, your body ends at your fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
And to be human kind of means mastering this in some domain.
Totally.
And then you choose the domain. And it could be multiple domains, you know. It doesn't have to be one.
Yeah.
But that I think that's what arm wrestling is. That's what it is, because I've lived over 4 decades, and I've done things where I've had to use my hands intricately. I've gone to the gym and all this stuff, but still, my arms are weak compared to other people who just are strong, right? My hands are weak. My wrists are weak.
Right.
So one thing that I got out of this that I figured was going to be like an extra given is that I'm like, I trust that my arms will get stronger. So now 15 months into this, they are. Like, I see
way
it.
Strong. Totally.
Like, I have videos on my YouTube channel where if you go and look at my first video, for example, or my first couple videos where you see how we had my table in my living room.
Yeah.
And I look at what my arms and hand look like. Yeah. I'm evolving.
Yeah.
So like, my bones are getting thicker.
I think about it.
I'm turning into another
I know
species.
what's going to happen. I'm gonna drive out to Santa Fe this summer, and I'm gonna see all these people that I haven't seen in a year, and they're gonna be like, "Shit, you've been going to the gym?" I'm gonna be like, a little bit, but mostly just been arm wrestling.
And then they're gonna explode.
Yeah. They're gonna be like, no, they're gonna look at me like I have 3 heads. When I told my dad I was going to arm wrestling,
oh my God, what was
like,
his reaction?
Are you out of your fucking mind?
What's wrong with you?
He was like, you're gonna hurt your arms. It's called arm wrestling. I was like, yeah, I know, but I think I'm having fun with it. So he was like, don't hurt your hands, Michael. And I'm like, all right.
So how long have you been doing this now?
A few months, 3, 4.
Has it been 6 yet?
No.
It's almost 6,
Definitely
right?
not, yeah.
So what's your father's opinion now? Do you know?
I've done stupid things before. I've done ridiculous things. I've made bad decisions before.
Right.
You know, financially and
But
elsewhere.
is he looking at you 4 months in now and saying, "Oh, so that arm wrestling thing is not as bad as I thought," or is he?
Yeah, I think he's relinquished control.
Okay.
You know, to an extent, he's just kind of like, Michael's going to do what he's going to do,
right?
And he's going to have fun with it. And yeah. And he sees that I'm enthusiastic about it.
Yeah,
and I enjoy coming.
Like if
and all
you
this
want
kind
to
of
do
stuff.
it.
Yeah, and even with like going to the gym, he's like, "Be careful with that," you know, because it's the thing. He comes from this perspective, and this is what my whole dynamic has been my whole life. It's like, be careful lifting the Trader Joe's back because you might have a gig. You need to practice tomorrow. Don't fucking strain your fingers. I'm not even talking about don't break your arm. I'm talking about like don't strain your fingers.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
You know what I mean? Like no strain, no nothing, 0. You know, that's always been the whole thing. So his perspective is like, don't do things that you can get hurt, because he's seen colleagues that are violinists or fucking flautists, whatever it is. And it's
it
like,
goes bad.
They enjoy horseback riding, you know, and then they fly off the fucking horse.
Right.
And they're like out of work for a year. And it's like, party's over. You know, like they really enjoyed horseback riding.
Yeah.
It was like the highlight of their fucking life. But then it's like they broke their wrists and they shattered their spine, you know, and it's like, wow, party's over, you know. So that he's just like, don't even scratch the surface of this shit.
Let's talk about that for a second, because we're both guitar players. So we're not entry level guitar players. We've taught.
Right.
So like we come to a certain level, right?
Yeah.
And
we've mastered the guitar.
Yeah. So
it's safe to say this is a masterful thing that we have.
So I'm gonna see if we can both come up with a plausible argument against what your father's saying. So you have to be able to delicately play your guitar with exacting intricacy to be fluidly fast and specific.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, once you really get that statement becomes reality for you, so that every microsecond decision you make on the guitar to choose notes and execution of notes is successful to a high degree because of that statement, you're like, wow, this is what I've been striving for, right? And I'm sure your father, the same exact thing can be said about the violin, right?
Totally. Even more so. Yeah.
Even more so. So what I'm interested in is wondering if it's okay to say that once you have that fluidity and that mastery, because what I've noticed is the more that I strengthen my hands and fingers, they don't get stiff and slow and inexact. And I've heard it. It's actually, the correct word would be more, it's like, I don't know if there's the word I can think of, but I'm more solid.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's like a solid base in allowing that to happen on the guitar. Totally. So I actually have more confidence that I'm like, oh, it's actually easier to access that mastery.
Totally. Yeah.
So the question is like, is your father wrong about that, about the violin? Or is it the violin is different where he really just better be fucking careful with his hands?
I think that it's both leaning towards the latter. I think the violin is just such an unbelievably demanding.
Is it because it's more nuanced?
It's more nuanced, yeah.
In expressivity, where people will hear, oh, you sound like you've been arm wrestling today.
Yeah. No, I remember like what Sam Harris said about, you know him?
Yeah.
A neuroscientist, he has this great podcast. He describing how insane Mormonism is.
Okay.
He's like, it is by definition more implausible than just Christianity because it makes more specific claims, like that Christ is going to come to Oregon or whatever the fuck it says.
Okay.
It's like there's just no argument that it is simply more implausible, right? And harder to prove. So with the violin, it's like, it's very certifiably more difficult than the guitar. It doesn't have frets. It's one more thing it has to think about that we don't. It's intonation, right? And then we have a binary system if you're playing with a pick, right? Down or up, right?
Right.
They have a whole spectrum. The bow is feet long. And you can play down and up everywhere on that whole thing with long strokes, short strokes. My friend Diliana, a violinist, she was talking about the trumpet. She's like, the trumpet is so stupid. You blow into the thing and then you choose what valves. There's only a certain number of iterations between these three valves. She's like, that's one stroke, down or up, right? That's it. She was like, I have thousands of strokes in my bow. Thousands. No one can even quantify it because it's essentially unlimited, right?
Let me ask you something about...
it's just insane.
I don't want to get on a tangent on trumpet, but I love that you said trumpet because I feel like trumpet's one of those instruments where you can play it as dumb as possible. And then you got Miles Davis, who, how the fuck does he pull that off when he did it? Where it's like, okay, that's the trumpet. And then other shit is like, God, I hate that. Like when they just play trumpet in like what do they call those things? The bumpers at the fucking football game or something. Oh. You know, it's like, so that's the dumb trumpet.
Right.
And then like the marching band style trumpet.
Yeah. My dad said he's like, when he hears a jazz trumpet player, he's like, sounds like a mariachi band. Because he's comparing it to like a super refined classical trumpet player. Right?
Yeah. So what's the difference between the super refined classical trumpet player and Miles Davis?
I think it's mostly in their embouchure. I mean, I know very little about the trumpet, right? But it's their lips and their embouchure and their wind control.
Right. So it's in your mouth.
Right? Yeah. It's not in their fingers.
Yeah. Right.
That's for sure. It's not this.
So stupid trumpet guy he sucks with his mouth. His mouth is garbage.
Yes, totally.
And he's fine with it.
Right.
He's just going to blow
Yeah.
real hard and go.
Totally. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, look, I mean, the guitar open position is the same thing. It's like if you never leave open position, the guitar is unbelievably easy. That's why it's so popular. It changed the world, right?
Right.
It's a piano you can carry on your back,
Right.
and put a cape on. You can play any key, right?
And the right hand is your mouth. Yeah. Your expressivity.
Two options, down or up. It's like so silly, right? Of course, now I put fucking finger picks on every finger, and I've just, now all of a sudden I have how many strokes? I have 1,000 different options, combinations,
Yeah. Now you're like a lobster with 8 arms.
Yeah.
That has all these options.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I don't know what to say about that.
That's what's funny. I mean, with arm wrestling, it's like, what are the strokes? It's like, how many strokes are there? It's essentially infinite because you're combining all these different things, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's anatomy is slightly different in their size of the length of their arm, how strong their wrist
and there's
is,
always something to be said for what should you be doing for your specific body.
Right. And what are your weaknesses? Strengthen those.
Right. And it's never cookie cutter, boring, paint by numbers. It's always like, okay, you specifically right now in this point in time, given the circumstances, it's this.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks from now, it'll change.
Yeah.
If you do the work, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about what in your 4 months or so of arm wrestling have you learned compared to day one? Like in terms of, holy shit, this is the journey. What's going on? What's changed?
I think the first thing is now when I walk up to the table, I know where I am, because the first day it was like, do you stand close to the table?
So you're comfortable at the table.
And now it's like, I know where to go. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say I have some kind of like impeccable technique. So far from it. Right.
Right.
But it's not this foreign space anymore. So that's great. That happened. That took, 2-3 practices, right? To feel like, okay, I can step up to the table and have a basic idea of what to do, right? I don't look like I have no idea what I'm doing, right?
Right.
So that just appeared. Great. Phenomenal. But then the shit that I've really learned is taking these 3 or 4 strokes, let's call them, right? These motions, right? Or the positions, say, right? Of posting up and staying high, rising, climbing, that technique with cupping and pronating, and just starting on going inside and accessing some of that strength, combining all those into one connected motion.
Yeah. So just to reiterate for anybody who's listening and not seeing, you could see it on the video, obviously, but what to kind of like put what you're saying in a category. We're only talking about starting position, middle position, not winning and losing.
Yeah.
How you approach that middle area where the fight is, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's where the connective tissue needs to be strong between these motions, right? So that they become one big thing. And not even necessarily fast. That's later, right? I'm not at the point where it's useful for me to learn how to hit super hard, right? I have to get these motions and connect them together. This is the same thing with ping pong or with guitar. It's like you spend 1 week working on rhythm, another week working on harmony, another week working on your left hand technique. Another week, it's like this is all part of one sculpture, right? And that's what I'm seeing myself getting better at, is that it's not like rise, okay, now cup, now pronate. It's like this is all happening together, right? Whether it's fast or slow, that's just a matter of time, right? But the idea that this is all one package that we're wrapping up, that's what I'm feeling like. That's what I'm learning. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and that takes time.
Yeah,
that takes time because just moving these gigantic elements of movement, let's say compared to guitar playing or anything like that,
right?
Moving your hand in these huge ways and your wrist and putting it all together in a fluid motion, it takes time.
Yeah.
If you're not a natural, and almost none of us are at that, because it's like this technical explosion of arm wrestling is new. This is not normal. Back in the 60s and 70s, these things maybe existed for professional arm wrestlers that have been doing it for decades, but when other than those top people, arm wrestling didn't have this technical kind of intricacy that it does now, which is why the people are coming into it, because the technical intricacy, I think, is the draw. Right.
And we had this great match between Devin and John Brzenk, which was that whole thing just personified.
Yeah.
Right? It's like John's this old school, the greatest of all time, right? It's like these never made a video on how to pronate in his life. He says he's never done an arm wrestling exercise, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the thing about John Brzenk is he's the guy that the movie Over the Top is about, and he's in the movie. So the thing about it is when you first hear about John Brzenk and you're into arm wrestling, no one knows who John Brzenk is, you know? And his name comes up as the greatest of all time, and he's like 57 years old now, and he's coming back.
He's an airplane mechanic.
But the why is he the greatest of all time? So I think he was 22 years old when he won the Over the Top tournament that the movie was based on. And then before that, he was a teenager when he beat like everyone that there was to beat, you know? So he was like 19, like when he beat his greatest challenge, which was like Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker was like the one person that he couldn't beat until age 19. Yeah. This guy's a phenom. Yeah. Right?
Totally. Clearly has like some kind of crazy talent.
190 pounds and just something about, and you look at him and you're like, he just looks like a regular guy.
He doesn't look like Devin Lair. Like people see him and they're like,
it doesn't connect, right? Yeah. And Sylvester Stallone kind of plays him in the movie, supposedly, kind of, right? Not really, but like loosely based. And now Sylvester Stallone in the movie is like the character that he's playing is, you know, he's got his shirt off, he's ripped, he's got like muscle bellies that like look good on camera. John Brzezink's not that guy.
Not at all.
Yeah. Not at all. And he won that fucking truck. Right. That the movie's based on, that he won. You know? So it's like, it's a really interesting thing. The reason why I bring that up is because when I first heard of John Brzenk and I started to understand, oh, well, this guy's the greatest. How do I learn what he does? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my take on it, and I'm going to ask you what your take on it is, when I swear to God, I've been watching John Brzenk for the first year before Armbet. So like there's a whole year before the 15 months I'm talking about where I have the table. I'm trying to watch these videos. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to pull a little bit. Yep. And I'm looking at John Brzenk do his thing, and I don't even know what he's doing. Yeah. It's like he's just doing this thing that just you can't figure it out because it's so, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like they call him the perfect storm or the quiet storm or something, because it's like it's not like when you see Devin and Michael Todd. Yeah. It's like this crazy Matt Mask. This dramatic arm wrest. He's just like, he's fighting, and then you just see his wrist go a bam, and then he just takes it down. Yeah. And it's like, how did he do that? Yeah. Yeah. So that's the interesting thing about John Brzenk, is I was totally clueless at understanding and watching what he did. Because then you're learning, well, what do you call that? Mm-hmm. Is he doing a low hook, a high hook? Is it a hook? Is it a top roll with a hook first? Is it side pressure? Right. Is it all side and then top roll? What is he doing?
Well, that's like the chicken or the egg, right? It's like, is this a top roll or is this just where he felt weakness, so he did that? Yeah. And I think it's that. I think he's doing these things. Yeah. When he was 19, I don't think these words existed. You know? Right. So he's like,
that's funny. Yeah.
He's like, that's where I feel weakness, so I'm going to go that way. I feel weakness here, I'm going to go that way. So he's just doing this reading, right? Yeah. He's like making up chess as he goes. Yeah. Right? He's like, that's where I have to go. I'm going to go there. And now we're identifying these things and the theories being made up, right? I mean, that guy, Carlo Gesualdo, was writing fucking crazy counterpoint with non-functional harmony before Bach was even born. You got to check that shit. It makes no sense.
Now,
now we can analyze all of it.
You mentioned Bach, and I didn't know this. You probably know this. I recently heard someone talking about Bach and how while Bach was alive, almost no one knew he was even alive, and no one heard his fucking shit.
No.
And now, when I started to study Bach on guitar, I assumed that these things that sounded so amazing, everyone knew about at the time, and that's why he fucking wrote them.
No, he was
this
the
fucking
Einstein.
guy was just doing this shit, and no one even knew.
Yeah. No, he was Einstein.
It was like discovered by accident after his death or something. These fucking things.
There were just chests full of music. I mean, they
could have missed.
Oh,
right.
Oh, yeah, and there's plenty more that we don't. Somebody did the math, and it's like that dude wrote so much music that he would have had to spend something like 9 hours a day average only writing music, and like every day of the week, his entire life, just to write how much we have, and that's just to physically write the ink on the paper.
Like, was this guy like the definition of autistic?
And he had like 17 kids.
Oh, wow.
He was getting busy too.
How is this even possible?
It doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
These freaks Einstein like figured out the way the universe works.
Right.
John Brzenk figured out how to fucking arm wrestle.
Right.
And then it's like a dude like Devin comes along. That's the whole thing. Einstein wasn't right about everything.
Right.
We've improved on some of the things, right? Like he did. He had no idea that the universe was expanding. Now we know that that's the fundamental truth, is that it's expanding, right? He suspected this, and he had something called the universal constant.
The cosmological
constant. That's what it is, right? Which he said was his biggest blunder. It turns out it was completely correct. Right? He just had it on the wrong side of the equal sign. But and like Bach was, now we know more. Now Strauss wrote all kinds of fucking crazy shit, right? And now it's like Stravinsky took days. So there are other, it developed. So I think that's where arm wrestling's going, is that the theory is getting more rounded, right? It's getting sculpted. And now a dude like Devin is like, yeah, this is some of the theory. And I think in 10 years, Devin's going to seem like archaic, right? It's going to be so much more figured out, right? It's going to be like, this is what it is. And it's going to be like, oh, we used to call that a top roll. This is called this. It's going to, it's going to get so sculpted. It's going to get really organized because it's getting more popular, and more smart people are going to get into it, not just brute force animals. And it's going to be like, okay, this is really cool. And I think the theory is going to take over.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because a few weeks ago I was texting somebody that comes to our practice sometimes, and I was saying how we need to come up with new moves,
right,
that haven't been done yet, and name them. And it may seem like that's impossible, but I'm like, no, I think it's going to inevitably happen. You just need to put the time in.
There got to be moves that are different for a guy that's 5'8" like me, and a dude who's 6'6".
Undiscovered moves, things that are unpopular.
Yeah, something you can do with your hand on the peg that no one's like, oh, that actually really works. These kind of things have got to start coming up with more people getting into it that aren't, Navy SEALs fucking dudes like Devin, right? What was he in the Canadian Special Forces?
Yeah.
Dude was running 20 miles a day, and he's 6'6", and he's like this, fucking Thor. He's a Greek god.
Yeah, I haven't met him, but everyone who meets him is astounded by his physical stature. So,
oh yeah, no. If that dude walked into your subway train, everyone would be staring. People don't realize 6'6" is like so tall, and it's like a basketball player,
and he's not athletic and a normal looking human. So that's the other interesting thing.
Right, exactly. I mean, Andre the Giant was 7'4", right?
Yeah,
I like to think he would have been the greatest arm wrestler of all time.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. When you're that giant and just naturally strong. Yeah, Andre the Giant is weird. Like when you see videos of how big he was compared to other giant dudes and what he was able to do with one arm.
Ridiculous.
It's insane. It's insanity.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I was talking to John about that with Andre the Giant. He was like, not necessarily, because the table's designed for someone between 5'8" and 6'4".
Uh-huh.
Like, he wouldn't even be able to fit on the table.
Yeah.
His arm in the pad, his hand would be over the edge of the other side of the table.
Well, it'd be more like this. I disagree with that. I'll give you a funny example. You know how big Cleve Dean was? Okay. You're familiar with Cleve Dean?
No.
So Cleve Dean is one of those guy that was like really famous in the early days of arm wrestling, like 70s, 80s. And he's just a huge human. And he got bigger and fatter and stronger in his older age. He's gone now. But he was one of those guys where John Brasink went against him and beat him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was a thing. Like, he beat Cleve Dean. So I'll give you an example of why I disagree about the Andre the Giant thing. So back then, in the early table days, when they were still figuring out the pad, like sometimes it would change over the years and you don't know why, and maybe because they didn't know why. But whatever the hell they were thinking when they first made those tables, like I'm talking post 60s, maybe 70s tables, and then early 80s, right? So like right before the over-the-top time, the elbow pad was a donut. Oh. So it looked like a hemorrhoid pillow.
Fuck.
And you didn't move it.
Move around. You just stuck right in the middle.
I think it was just there. You didn't have to move it right or left, or maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyway, wherever it was for right or left, it was just a donut. So what it means is in the middle, it was flat and low.
Yeah.
And on the outside, it was a higher cushion. Mm-hmm. And Cleve Dean's elbow was so fucking big that when he put it in there, the elbow filled the entire donut, and it didn't, if he just put it down, it didn't go anywhere.
Right.
So he would just lock his elbow into that donut, and there was no chance that thing was fucking going anywhere.
Yeah.
So now think of Andre the Giant. So yeah, he's bigger than Cleve Dean, and his elbow is probably the size of the 7x7 pad.
Right.
And he would just put it down.
Yeah.
And he would have to be really high, but on his side of the table. I'm trying to think of how awkward 7'4" would look at a table where it's meant to be a 6-foot person.
Well, like, you've seen the picture of him holding a Coke can. It looks like he's holding a fucking miniature toy. It's like him standing at the table would be like, when you try to sit in the kindergartner desk.
Yeah.
It would be like that. He'd be like, it would be at his fucking knees. He'd be like leaning over.
So a current day living example of that is Shaquille O'Neal.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And when Devin gripped up with Shaquille O'Neal, and this is funny because Joe Rogan just met Devin Larratt.
Right.
So Joe Rogan mentioned how he couldn't believe Devin Larratt's hand.
Right.
But Devin Larratt gripped up with Shaquille O'Neal, and Devin Larratt couldn't believe Shaquille O'Neal's hand.
That's what I think. What did Devin say? That's the strongest non-arm wrestler he's ever felt.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
couldn't believe the strength in that.
He's so huge. Yeah.
Naturally strong.
7'4", you can palm a ball with 2 fingers. You know what I mean? A basketball, it's just nuts.
He was like, when I gripped up with Shaq, I wished he would enter the sport of arm wrestling.
Right.
And it's funny because you can, because you're older. Mm-hmm. The thing is, do you want to? And if you're Shaquille O'Neal, no, you don't. Because, you don't have to.
And I love that in that scene, they're on whatever news, whatever.
Some morning program.
Thing. Yeah. And Shaq, like, as soon as he's done, he's like,
right.
He's like, he's like, my inflammation's really up right now.
He felt like, the tendon pain.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Even that dude, it's like this world-class athlete. It's enormous. Arm wrestles for the first time for 14 seconds.
Yeah.
And he's like, ow.
I've never done that before.
Never felt that bad after 10 seconds of something.
Right. I want to talk about real quick how during these practices that we have here, the other thing I like about it is not just new people that I enjoy meeting, and you get to talk about these amazing things about life that coincide in our lives and all this stuff. You never know who's going to come through that door. Jack Arias has been coming through here regularly.
Right.
And
last week.
He was here. He was here not this week, but last week. Exactly.
Right.
He just came to stop by.
Yeah.
And then like 2 times before that, he came by with Emo Cincinnati, right? The fucking Georgian champ, 145 pounds, right? And he doesn't look like he's 145 pounds, like in the upper body. He looks like he's fucking 180, 190
right.
In the upper body.
Yeah.
But he's like 145. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So the time after that, by the way, so if you look at our YouTube videos, Emo's teaching us how to move. So
that was before I started coming.
So
that was a while ago.
there's some things I want to say about that because so 2 weeks before that, I was in the hospital. So I was like recovering and taking it easy, where like I couldn't arm wrestle, and I was like, oh, I don't want to strain myself, but I'm gonna have a practice. So like that's the time when he came, and when he came, and I'm pulling with Emo, and I'm just like, oh, it's cool. It's been 2 weeks. I'm fine. Like whatever. Deborah was filming me, and even she was on camera saying, hey, careful moving that fast, whatever, you don't want to hurt yourself. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. So like what happened is I had that footage for months and months because I haven't been uploading at that time. And I just remembered, I was like, damn, I got to dig out that Emo footage from practice and put it out there because it's been sitting in my thing for months. So I just put it out there. And let me tell you, looking at that footage again now, fresh, it's like I'm seeing it for the first time, which is what it would be like when you see it. And there's so much to learn about that because even though like I was there and other people were there, John was there. When you watch the footage from the 90-degree orthogonal view where you're like, oh, that's what happened. You learn things and then you'll pick up things that you missed because you were thinking too hard while he was teaching you. And when you go through all the different people that Emo's coaching and teaching, you'll notice that he's trying to teach us all the things, but like specifically different people, specific things. So if you look at what he's teaching each one of us, you pick up all the things that he's trying to teach us. And God bless Emo, man. He's such a fucking nice guy. He's so patient. He was so nice for him to come and have such an awesome attitude. Like most of us at that practice, especially compared to him, it was like trying to teach somebody who doesn't know anything. And it's like, I'm trying to teach you this. I hope this isn't going in one ear out the other, but here's what it is. And luckily it's on film, video. And the thing is, like, I've picked up things that I forgot that I should be learning from those videos just from me watching it. And then like the last time Constantine was here, we talked about that video because he was here that day. But that was one of the times where he didn't pull because he comes, it doesn't pull every week because it hurts too bad. And that day he didn't pull. And he watched that video and I was talking to him about, one of the things that Emo was trying to teach us that I forgot because he's teaching us speed also. Technique and speed. And his main point is he's like, look, there's this technique and it's these movements in general, plus putting it all together. And then it's speed on top of that with power. It's so complicated. Like once you get to the 4th level of that, each step is, it's like exponential in trying to grasp it all. So you just got to like put your time in. So I told Constantine, hey, one of the things that I forgot that he was trying to show us and teach us, and specifically when he was teaching me too, I saw what he did. He was telling me to do this. I was like, I totally forgot about that, like for the last 3 months. And I was like, and I showed him like, this is what it is. And he was like, I totally missed that. And I'm like, yeah, you see how easy it is to watch these videos and miss a thing that someone will point out and say, did you see that? Like, are you doing that? Can you retain that and try it? There's so much to it. So it's so... I
mean, reviewing video is huge. Period. At all stages. Because you get this third-person perspective on yourself. It's unbelievable. And you see progression. And you can say, oh, shit, well, I'm a lot stronger than I was at the beginning. If someone's learning to play the fucking guitar and they're not at some point recording themselves and listening back, I mean, you're in big trouble. You have to listen to yourself and hear how terrible you sound.
When I was a kid,
and how inaccurate your rhythm is.
I didn't have iPhone to video myself.
I
Every
taped
kid
that.
has no excuse now.
A mirror goes a long way. I think, I wonder if in arm wrestling, it would be an interesting experiment. You know those like the back of the door mirrors you can get for like $3?
Yeah.
That fucking TJ Maxx or whatever.
Yeah.
Just put one of those up so you can watch yourself go against someone.
That's an interesting
And it's like,
idea.
wow, this is what I look like. Because it's, my dad talks about it with the bow. It's like, you think you're using the whole bow, but you're really only using like the middle. And he's like, go all the way and go past. Then go all the way and then go past. And you realize how large the range of motion is. And it's like in here, it's like when we're arm wrestling, it's like when they're saying, go down further, you know, cup more.
Right.
And you see in the video, and it's like, it doesn't look like I'm cupping at all.
Right.
Oh, fuck. I thought I was cupping the shit out. Doesn't look like I'm cupping. It looks straight. But you have to study the video. But to see that in real time, a video in real time essentially is looking in a mirror. Right?
Yeah.
And to see like, oh, I have to go down that much further to look like when I see that guy doing it. And you feel like you're going fast. And it's like, oh, no, that's actually really slow.
Right.
And in the mirror, it's like, oh, I'm going to go faster. And now just put a mirror up.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
And see what your footwork looks like. Look at how positioned, where am I? How wide am I? It feels wide. It's not wide. Then you look at the video, it's like, go wider. That's what in ping pong, I used to video the lessons like crazy. And look at the video. It started getting redundant because, it was like, okay, I know what I have to work on now.
Right.
But I should start videoing again. But yeah, it's like you think this feels so fast. It's like, oh my God, he's feeding the balls over and over. And it's like, oh, this is like so fast. You look at the video and it looks like so slow compared to when you watch the professionals play, right?
Well, one of the perfect examples of that with arm wrestling, when you first see the videos, is if you first start doing ready goes.
Yeah.
And you're watching the video and you see how much fucking time is between
Eons
the
of
word
time.
go and when you move. It's like ready, go.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, you took that long. You swear it was right on the go. And it was like, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, totally.
And it's funny because the way I teach people to do that is I'm going to say, look, we're all going to say ready, go. One word.
Yeah.
And when you hear go.
Right.
And then what happens is you end up going on go.
Right.
Because you thought you went on
Totally.
And because that's how slow you are.
Yeah.
And that's step one. And that always works. It's weird, right? And then eventually you learn to go on go.
Right.
And that's why when you see these guys super hyped in matches, you can't fault them for going early. Because they're so ready to go right on go.
Yeah.
That they're playing with milliseconds.
Yeah.
So when
I think anyone that has drag raced must think about this, right?
Yes, it's the exact same thing. You go after, you're done.
Oh yeah.
You won't catch up unless you have some kind of magical engine and tranny.
Totally. Well, that's like the Tesla, right? It's an immediate all access to 1,000 pounds of torque.
And it'll beat the best fucking Porsche out there.
Yeah.
But I think in a quarter mile, the Porsche catches up and beats it.
Catches up, exactly.
And
off the line, the thing is like immediate. But if you're driving a gas-powered car, you have to hit the gas before green.
Yeah.
Before go.
Right.
For it to start on the green.
Exactly. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. So we're still driving gas-powered cars with our arms.
Yeah.
Start early.
Yeah. So then you have to be aware that arm wrestling is also understanding the limitations of your central nervous system. And then how much of the limitations of your central nervous system are you capable of controlling? Because maybe you can't control the speed of your central nervous system. You just suck at fucking controlling because you got shitty motor skills.
Yeah, if you do it 20,000 times, you're going to be really good at it, though.
Right.
Yeah. 20,000,
And that's it's like you're not joking. You're like, it really is 20,000.
Well, I mean, that's what I tell my students all the time.
Yeah, because
I'm like, you think you practice your scales for like 5 minutes? It's like, I've fucking done this fucking etude, this etude of doing scales through the cycle of fourths, like something like 20,000 times.
Yeah. Like there
It's
are
a realistic estimate.
There are things that you've done on guitar compared to when you started that by now, if you tried to count how many times you did them, there is no number that you can think of that is accurate, or you're just like, the number's so large.
Yeah.
And you realize that that's where you have to be.
Yeah.
So this is no different.
Well, and you see the videos of Emo on YouTube, and he's like, he's training hard. He's on a table, and he's got the pulley, right? And he's just doing a fucking hard smash, rolling back. He's fucking top rolling this machine down into the fucking thing. And he's not doing it like 3 times slowly. It's like 20 times fast.
Yeah.
And then it's like rest. And then 20 times fast. You know? My table tennis coach was telling me he grew up in Ghana. He was the champion of Ghana. And their training routine, they would train for 6 or 7 hours every day, at the highest level. And they would, rather than say we're going to do it at 15 minutes or an hour of doing loop drives, we're going to do 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers start getting high when it's like you have to replicate this thing exactly the same way. It's like thousands of times you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I wonder if this is where I think a lot of strong guys may be doing, what do I know, right? But I wonder if doing high reps for exercises is more effective.
Yeah.
Because then you're really, it's so deep, you know?
Well, that's where the central nervous system thing comes in.
It comes, exactly, right? It's not powerlifting, arm wrestling, right? I mean, yes, it ends up being like, you need to do this one time.
Yeah, it's a strength sport, but it's not powerlifting.
Right. So it's not like I see these Larry Wills. It's like, let's see how much Levon can rise, how much weight.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it doesn't matter. He can do it correctly 1,000,000 times in a row, and it's never going to be wrong, right? That's what matters. And he can replicate this over and over. It's a consistent thing. I think John Brzezinski, he could just like, he could go in and say, I can rely on my technique because it's sound. I can replicate it, right? He's not reinventing his technique every time he goes up there. You know, I think that's a big thing. Is just replicate.
Yeah, I mean, that's really like the test always, right? Like, I'll give you an example. I just remembered before I was about to say something else. So I pick up the guitar at 13, and I'm just plinking around on it, and I think by this time I have a book that's showing me what a blues progression is, right? And it's probably explaining pentatonic scales on a level where I still don't understand what a pentatonic scale is, but it's showing me where you put your fingers and stuff. And I'm just plinking around. And maybe I've been playing guitar for 3 weeks or a month.
Yeah.
And I like it. And I'm probably good at it for 3 weeks, right? With no lessons. But but then my grandfather visits us here in this house because I lived here back then. And it's like 1986. And I'm in our room. Me and my brother shared a room over there. And I'm sitting there playing the guitar. And I didn't know my grandfather was going to come. And he comes, says hello, whatever. Not to me, like says hello to my parents, whatever. And I'm sitting in there in my room. And he peeks in and he sees me playing the guitar. And he's like, not saying anything. I don't know he's there. Like at first, and he's watching me, right? And then I realize he's standing there watching me, and he's like, and I stop, and he's like, oh, so you play the guitar now? And I'm like trying to think, is he making fun of me? He's like, he's making fun of me. And he looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, why? And he's just like, can you play that again, what you just played? And I was just like, you motherfucker, you're fucking with me. Yeah. And you're telling me right now that I suck. Yeah. Because there's no way that what you just watched me do, I could do it again. Replication, man.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like learning replication on the table is like when I first started learning this thing and I came across guys like Paul Lynn. Mm-hmm. That fucking dude kept saying shit like, stay in your lane. You know, he kept saying shit like, what else did he say? There's these words in arm wrestling where he's like, your move or whatever, and or your winning lane, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, well, what the fuck does that mean? That doesn't tell me anything. So what he's saying is, can you replicate your strongest move?
Yes.
And you should stick to it once you discover what it is.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That's what the first 5 seconds of your video, when you put Emo and Lorenzo.
Right.
I mean, you and I know Lorenzo is one of the strongest dudes at our practice, right?
Right, yeah.
He's immensely strong. He's a huge fucking strong hand. He's a fucking personal trainer. He knows how his body works, right?
Yeah.
And I love that in the video you can see that he's really inquisitive about what Emo is doing, like what muscle is he activating on that,
Yeah.
He's feeling, is it here? Is it here? Oh, I see where it is. It's like, oh, so then you can replicate what that dude's doing.
Man, you just reminded me of another amazing thing about that Emo video. So let me talk about 2 things. There's one of the reasons why it was so interesting cutting that thing together and watching it while I was doing it to relearn it.
Yeah.
Is when you watch Emo teaching each person. And Emo, English is not at all his first language.
Right.
And he's saying to us, almost like he's saying, look, just imitate me.
Yeah.
And he's like showing you.
Yes.
And he's like, look. And then he's saying, now you do it. And what he's doing is he's always going, go. Because he wants you to go.
Make the connection.
Not just like do it. He wants you to go on go.
Yeah.
Because that's like the main substrate of this thing. You got to go on go. And he's like, go. And then he's like, okay, stop. And then he'll be like this. And then he'll be like this, right?
Yeah.
And then he'll be like, okay, go. And then he'll inevitably go, this one is good.
Yes. Right.
And then it's like, oh shit. Why?
Do that again.
You got to rewind it and be like, why did he say this one is good?
Yes.
And then he'll be like, go.
Mm-hmm.
And then he won't say this one is good for a while because you fucked it up, right?
Yeah.
And then he'll be like, oh, this one is good. And he'll be like this.
Yeah.
Okay, again, go. And then he'll drive it into you. And then there's
your percentages go a little up, right?
So then there's these guys, you'll watch the practice, and there's some times where he doesn't say this one is good.
Right.
And it's because it's not.
Right.
And he's being nice to you.
Yes.
By stopping you, because he's like, this is going nowhere. And he's like, okay. And he's like, okay, next. And you got to also take that to heart and be like, okay, none of those were good. And we got to move on.
Right.
Or go switch to the other arm. So every time somebody else gets that one is good, you better be paying attention.
Yes.
And then the thing where you were talking about Lorenzo, there was a really main thing that was really important when he was teaching us right in the beginning. He was trying to explain to us that on go, you got to do a really quick lat drag.
Yeah.
But specifically, he was like, watch. And the way he does it is he pulls his trapezius muscle up.
Yeah, up.
And turns his head to the side and squeezes
all that shit up.
his whole upper back
Yeah.
while pulling. And he makes sure his hand comes really close to the side of his face. So he keeps saying right here.
Yeah.
Right to the cheek, right? And a lot of people wouldn't intuitively get that, and they'd be like, or like here, like
right
to the, but it's like right here to the cheek, and be like, boom. And then once that's established where you're going, he was trying to explain like the lat is the thing that's pulling.
Right.
So what he was telling Lorenzo is like, feel it.
Right.
Because like, okay, the motion is one thing, but he was trying to say, but feel it. And then he says, relax first. So there's no tension in the lat. He's literally just flaccid. And then on go, it's bam. And that's, if you don't relax first, you won't have the speed.
You can't explode if you're already exploded.
Do you know how important that piece of information was right there? And like, if you don't watch those videos and you don't understand, you're just missing this guy's fucking award-winning instruction.
Right.
And it's just
this is
amazing.
what courage tells me every lesson at table tennis. He's like, you have to relax first. Literally, the racket is, your wrist is drooped like this. because the end is like this, right? But it's like this.
So the paddle is hanging.
It's hanging. And your wrist is drooped like this and your fingers are all loose.
Yeah.
And then
Huh.
you can get this crazy spin with your wrist, right?
Uh-huh.
And your body relaxes, your feet relax, and then you breathe out and it's like, drive the fucking ball. But it all started with loose, relaxed, and everything contracts, follow through. And he says, wait up here, do it again. But you have to relax again, right?
Right.
It's like, whoa, this is fucking crazy. It's on, off, on,
On, off. Exactly.
on. You know, but it has to be, it can't go on if you're already on.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
I like it because then with this, what we work on a lot, obviously, is just getting some isometric training, right? Just getting stronger and feeling that like
You have to lay the foundation to some degree.
You have to get that, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to be able to access that quickly. And I think that's where Emo's obviously coming from a competition background.
Well, that's another thing. 10 years experience, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Another level.
Yeah. National champion.
Yeah.
That's insane. And when you meet a person like that, like I met him first at the ABC thing, which was like a few weeks before that, I think,
right?
Or a week before that. No, it was like 2 or 3 weeks before that, where Jack told us all to go to this ABC News thing in Queens,
right?
And he brought Emo with him. And I was like, oh, okay. He said some Georgian champion's going to be there, whatever. And there was actually a girl there who was like a Russian champion too, I think.
Yeah.
And it was Emo and her that were like pros. And then the rest of us, right? A whole bunch of fucking arm wrestlers, New York arm wrestlers. All of them were there almost, right?
Yeah.
And when Emo walks in, you're just like, oh my God, this is a different species of human.
Right.
And you could see, and you're almost in awe of it. Like you almost want to be like, yo, relax, dude. Like, don't get starstruck. Even though I don't know who this is, it's like you're almost starstruck because you're like, holy shit, he's arm wrestling different. And you're like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. So then he does it, and you're like, holy fuck, that's another thing. Mm-hmm. And it's everything that we're not capable of doing. And you're like, wow, okay, cool. So then when he came here, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to be amazing that he's here. I can't even believe he's here. It's great. And I was glad that everyone was able to be involved who was here and that we filmed it. And what the thing that I noticed about that day too is like Jack was like, I want to bring him. I want him to teach you guys. I want you guys to know, we'll do this again, It's not going to be just one time. But like that day, I realized, I'm like, how often is this guy going to be able to come? Because he came here this one time. It's going to take us all 6 months just to get a little better so that it's worthwhile to see him again. Right. And I think it's been 5 months or something like that. It's literally been 5 months since he was here. And so maybe another month, and then maybe he'll have a reason to come here again. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that would be great. And,
I mentioned to John at the gym, I was like, bro, why don't we just pay that guy $300 to spend an hour with
Well, there's
us
always that, right?
And just like go on and off with the guy. Yeah. And just like get 3 of us together and just like, and John was kind of like, we could benefit from just working together. I'm more of the school of thought, if you got a pro, learn from the pro.
Right.
Like there is no such thing as him being too good to teach you some shit.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean,
you could be a shitty
good
teacher.
Teachers and bad teachers. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, if you can get up close and personal with a guy that's a pro, you're going to learn some shit just osmosis.
Yeah, because you're staring at him and you can't believe what you're seeing. And you're like, oh, I already know what I'm doing wrong on some level.
Dude, I was at a lesson with Courage, table tennis, and they had the Olympic trials going on at the club. It's like the premier club on the East Coast, so they had the trials there. And Lily Zhang is there, and all these, and they had this documentary called Topspin, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. And when she was in high school, she's this up and coming table tennis star. And so I see Lily there, and she's warming up on the table next to me. And Courage is like, just watch. I was like, first of all, she's cute as fuck. And I was like, oh, damn, okay. I need a girl like this that plays table tennis, man. This is great.
My new best friend.
Yeah. So I'm looking at, and just like the explosivity of what she's doing and her foot, everything is over and over. Replication, the same fucking motion. And it's so strong. And it's like her hair's flinging around in exactly the same way. That's how.
Right. There's no deviation.
No deviation. And it's just explosive. It's fucking strong. And the sound on the racket is
right
the same way every
same
time.
Sound.
And I'm like, and he's just watched this. I was like, fuck, that's awesome. So then we start doing our drills. And he was like, you just got like twice as good.
Wow.
I was like, your strokes are so much better. For watching her for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
You know?
That just, you know what you reminded me of? Your max deadlift is 450 and you're going to Crunch Gym. And maybe there's one other guy that deadlifts 450 in there sometimes and you can't get better. You join a new gym where everyone deadlifts average 700. Suddenly you're deadlifting 550 within a month.
Right.
That's the way that works.
Right.
You see what it takes and then suddenly you're better.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's like that with music. I mean, my dad started playing violin because he saw a violinist play a concert. And he was like, I want to do that. I tell my students, I'm like, not only do my students not even listen to fucking music, but they certainly don't go to see live concerts. And I'm like, what do you think? So I have to tell them once in a while. I'm just like, right now you're getting $1 million lesson. This is worth $1 million right now. Like you're watching me do this on a high level. Just watch. Do this because you're not going to a concert. You're not seeing somebody do this that you're looking up to like, wow, that's awesome. You're not watching a DVD of Led Zeppelin play and like imitating that. You're not taking the violin bow and hitting the thing and just like imitating, right? So it's like, you got to just watch me and just extract whatever you can. Of course, the eyes can't even keep track, for more than 10 seconds.
Well, this is awareness and consciousness. This is another thing that I'm really deep into. It's like, if you're like seemingly so dim-witted that you don't even know what's going on around you, is there any fucking hope for you? So like that's one of the most defeating things about some students where you're just like, I gave you everything. Yeah. You might as well have not come here. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny that the talent thing always comes into play, right? And with this, it has to occur to me. It's like, maybe I'm just not talented for arm wrestling. You know what I mean? It just has to, these thoughts have to come up if you're like a thinking person, right?
Sure. Well, I have that every week.
Oh, yeah.
Every week I know that I could cry myself to sleep and give up.
Right.
Or become somehow optimistically rational and remember that, okay, well, if I'm feeling that way, imagine all the other people that might feel this way. And I can actually say something to people preemptively to make sure that they don't give up.
Totally.
Because there are tons of reasons why you shouldn't feel that way about arm wrestling.
Right.
So,
well, and even if you really don't have that raw talent for something, just the realization that it's, first of all, everyone has some. There's no such thing as zero musical talent. People say, oh, I'm not talented. It's like, you have some. You just have to try.
You got to figure out what's stopping you when you say you don't have any.
Yeah, and do some analysis.
Yeah.
Do some thinking about it. Because with this, I mean, there's a lot of thinking, right? Because if it's just brute force strength, then you're going to be disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Think a lot.
You're one of the pure brute strength means you won't be doing this for long.
Right.
I won't see you later. Next year, you won't be here.
And you're going to be hurting because you're going to be using only your brute force strength and you're going to be going side pressure and you're going to fucking pop your elbow off.
At some point, you have to think your way through it.
Yes.
So if you won't be here.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's a good way to get over this notion that maybe I'm just not that good at this. It's like, okay, even if you're not, do some thinking and you're going to do as good as you possibly can. And you have to think. Because if you do have all that talent, right? This happens to brilliant musicians all the time. You have all this talent in the world, so you don't put the work in. And you get away with murder because you're still playing circles around everybody else with no work.
But then when the kid with less talent outworks you and you look like an asshole.
Absolutely.
That's,
My dad said on stage, no one cares if it took you 3 minutes to learn that passage or 3 years. Mm-hmm. If the motherfucker that learned it in 3 minutes can play it at 80%, but the guy that took 3 years can play it 85%, he sounds better. Mm-hmm. And on stage, when you're in the audience, no one cares how long it took you to do it. I like that.
Yeah.
I think there is a cap, though. I mean, that dude, like, you can't just become Barry Bonds.
A lot of people,
that guy has a tremendous amount of talent.
Yeah, what you just said right there, a lot of people don't even realize that that's a thing.
Right.
Then if you told them that, and they'd be like, holy shit, if I knew that, I would have changed everything.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about the industry of arm wrestling equipment and how much shit people buy to fuck around with that they think is going to help when they're not on the table. What are you doing or have you done?
Well, talk about a way to make arm wrestling more popular. Get people to spend money on it. People love spending money on shit. How did yoga get so fucking popular? You think it's because people wanted to be minimalistic fucking Buddhist monks?
No, because they're not still.
No. It's because they want to spend $60 on a yoga class and do some, say and say like, oh, you're exactly where you need to be right now.
Yeah, because you want to leave the class and tell everyone how much yoga you did.
And you spent $100 on fucking leggings.
It's like, oh, your ego's doing really well,
and
I see.
Yoga brick or whatever they call it. You spend like $30 on that. It's like, I just put a book on the ground and put a dictionary on the ground. Oh, fuck. I mean, that just became ridiculous, right? The spending money on shit.
So where do you spend the most money in the right places for arm wrestling?
I mean, I think pay someone for lessons.
So because these guys are all approachable and hireable to some degree.
They're dying for the extra.
You can call John Brzezinski
totally
and get him over to you if you pay for the plane ticket. And the number's not that high.
Right.
Like if you got a couple $1,000s to blow,
totally,
you will hang out with John Brzezinski at your house.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and YouTube can only go so far. The YouTube guitar players, we know how they play, right? They can make a 15-second video when they've done 300 takes for it, but they're never going to get called for a gig ever. And when they do get called for a gig, God forbid, and they have to learn the music and like sit there for 3 hours and fucking play this shit. It's like not going to happen. It's just not how it works. These guys aren't professional guitar players, right?
Yeah.
And with arm wrestling, it's like, yeah, you can watch all the Coach Ray videos in the world, but if you're not on a table with someone teaching you some shit, you're really going to get capped pretty quick.
I'm really glad you mentioned Coach Ray because Voice of Arm Wrestling is one of the first channels that I watched learning the first year.
Yes.
Because you're trying to understand all the stuff that's technical.
Yeah.
And
it's great. I mean, his channel's amazing. I love it.
Giannis is the guy that I always want to hear talk. Because like Coach Ray, I feel like he's like Giannis's sidekick. You know?
He's Robin.
And like, yeah, because like I know he likes to talk a lot and be the face out there on social media, and he's always talking and coaching and all this stuff. But honestly, when I was like, oh, Giannis is the guy, and then Coach Ray would talk after Giannis to fill in something, and then Giannis would always go, yeah, but I gotta say, in certain circumstances, it's not a good idea. And it's like, yeah, fucking Giannis knows what's up.
Yeah.
And Coach Ray is like maybe the more vocal of the two.
I mean, we know people are buying the multi-spinners. They're buying I bought the freaking, the karate belt from Devin. I could have just bought a karate belt.
Right.
For like a quarter of the price. But I bought the one that says armband on it. There's a certain, like, you want to wave the flag a little bit. Oh, I'm into this. The t-shirt, whatever the fuck it is. And that's great for the sport growing, right? And if there are companies that think they can make money selling arm warmers for specific for arm wrestling, or a fucking joint supplement that is marketed specifically to arm wrestlers, this kind of thing. This shit could get huge, right? And if people are going to spend the money on it, then great. That means that it's an economically viable project, And
the thing that I've spent the most money on is tables,
right? And
when you think about it, it's like, so does that make sense that that's the thing that is the biggest payoff? Absolutely. So the thing about me hosting practices is I realized I needed more than one table.
Right.
So I started to think, how am I going to acquire more tables? They take time. Which table do I get? Can I get the same table? Do I have to get a different one? All this stuff. Can I afford them? Right. Right.
Whatever.
Like I spent like what did I spend? Like fucking $1,500 in tables, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a lot of money if you really think about it. But the thing is, like, what's the payoff? So the payoff is astronomically immense.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because now I'm like,
And those are one-time purchases. They're not like a printer
Yeah.
where you have to put.
they're not going to break. You know,
Yeah.
It's fine. So the thing is, why is it an astronomical payoff? Is because I have the space and the time to host it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm inviting people that I know are going to come here, that I trust everyone is here for the right reason.
Yeah.
And we make, friendly relationships out of it, obviously.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I still didn't get to the point is why it's an astronomical payoff. It's because, let's say I didn't do any of this. What do I have to do? Okay. So let's say I never buy a table. And let's say I don't have a place to invite everybody. Mm-hmm. Even though I want to invite them, let's say to my living room. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. What if it gets crazy in here? I don't have a big living room, right? So now what do I have to do? Every fucking week, I got to find a practice to go to.
Yeah.
There's travel time, which, as you know, everybody,
totally.
including you, that comes here. You guys have to travel to and from here.
Well, those dudes are coming from freaking Brighton.
People are traveling from
Siberia.
out of state even. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
New Jersey, Staten Island, Connecticut, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what does it mean? It means that I'm not good at this and I'm fine with it. So I'm going to lose all the time. But guess what? By doing this, everyone else who comes here is like, holy shit, this is so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm like, how do I explain to you that I'm just as thankful, if not
Right.
more, that you came here? Because
Right.
what it means is in a year's time, I got to be at 50 practices
Right.
without leaving, but I met over 30 people in a year that come to practice,
totally.
and I got all that experience that I never would have got it any other way. So I'm glad to do it because I can.
Totally.
And let's make this better because we're all getting stronger together. And now we get to talk about it on a podcast, and the rest of the world will listen to this, and it just keeps growing.
It's very musical, man. This is the way the world fucking rotates. You know?
Right, yeah.
It can't only be money and business, right? It's like,
Well,
and it can't
talk
only,
to Travis Bajan.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, the economically viable project, like I said, that is real. Like, we live in a capitalist fucking world. Like, this is reality.
I mean,
and
you
if
can't
you
be
want arm
homeless,
wrestling to be big, there's got to be a way to make money at it
Right.
for a company or for an individual, whatever it is. But what you're doing here is like, it's what pro bono means. Pro bono means for the greater good, right? This is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what being a high functioning member of society is pro bono. It's like, we're going to make this thing good. We're going to do a good thing. And we're going to get stronger together. And we're going to have fun. We're going to make these relationships. And there's always some cost, right? If it didn't cost anything, it'd be like, there's no investment. And the cost has to be a loss financially.
Mm-hmm.
This is the nature of art. You have to buy the $3 million violin. And then you can play Brahms. You can make this beautiful art. You have to pay the stagehands at Carnegie Hall $900,000 a year. That's what they get paid. And now you've got the most well-maintained concert hall in the world and no issues. Everything's perfect, right? The New York Philharmonic has to negotiate a CBA so that the musicians get paid what they're worth, or else they're not going to get good enough musicians, and then they're not going to be able to play Shostakovich. I mean, do we need Shostakovich? Is the question.
Right.
Like, do we need to get stronger and
so now how much
better
is the
ourselves?
how much is the ticket price?
$60 to $300, and the ticket prices cover about 25% of the yearly budget if they sell out every show.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it is corporate and private donations.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be just financial loss is even the word. There has to be financial extermination. You just have to just light money on fire in order to do something good.
Well, isn't that what advertising is? Somehow, I was talking to a friend of mine who got into advertising by way of art.
Really?
And we talked about how one day about 15 years ago, I was on a job. And for some reason, that was the first time it dawned on me that the only reason I was getting paid that day is because advertising dollars paid for everything.
You're right. Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a minute. But that must mean that the only reason the world works is because everything is paid by advertising.
Yeah.
And I was like, this does not feel right.
Yeah, it's very weird.
So all of money seems to come from advertising.
Yeah.
And that's why TV stations will only do things that advertising will pay for. And now it's like, oh, wait, but that sounds like there's stipulations and it'll be corrupt and all that. It's
well,
like,
that's
yeah.
Because that's all because we're the product now.
Right, yeah.
That's the difference.
So we're the arm wrestlers. We're the product. How do we get those advertising dollars, right? Because that's what it takes.
Fuck. I mean, Joe Rogan he doesn't have advertising because Spotify has advertising.
Right.
So that
ultimately,
if Devin Larratt gets onto Joe Rogan and he's a highly, profitable project,
it changes everything, I think.
So yeah, so that's huge. But bigger picture, like more specific to the advertising, imagine if, whatever, my hypothetical Pro Nation Arm Wrestling Company, what a great name, huh?
Right.
Pro Nation Arm Wrestling, and you see like fucking Devin Larratt do a commercial, and it's like, just imagine someone is crazy enough to invest $10 million into a 5-second spot on the Super Bowl. Imagine, right? I mean, that would be unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. But it's like, what are we selling? That's the thing. What's an arm wrestling company going to sell? It's got to be.
Well, you know what advertising? Well, you know what you're always selling? There's an answer for that, right? Emotion. You're selling you feeling good about yourself
because you're wearing a No Limits arm wrestling hoodie.
Not even that. It's deeper than that. It's because you feel good about arm wrestling. So the branding and the product stuff helps you feel that way.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's what you're selling. It's like your feelings. Like, that's why people buy things. It's all feelings. It's like, this thing represents me.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. The one, I've always been like a flag bearer. Like when I get into craft beer, I'm like telling all my friends, like, come over. I'm going to have a tasting. We're going to taste these 4 years in a row of the Dark Lord Imperial Stout. And it's like, my friends that know nothing about beer, but now they're like obsessed, I want to be that guy that spreads the news, right? About this new interesting shit. So of course I'm telling my friends about arm wrestling, right? Telling them about watches. I've gotten people to waste a lot of money on watches, including John. Yes, and then or into vinyl records, or into death metal, or into French Impressionist music, or like whatever the fuck. I just want to spread these seeds as much as my mom's maiden name, Semenovich.
That's awesome. I like that.
Think about it.
Yeah.
SEMENOVICH.
Absolutely.
Seed thrower. Farmer, right?
Yeah.
So that's it's just like spread these ideas, whether it's like wearing a t-shirt or inviting someone to the practice,
So I'm going to spread a simple idea. So when Jack Arias came here the first couple of times, one of the times, like, because I think he's been here like 4 times. He comes when he can and when he's available, just to say hello, give us pep talks, tell us things, right? But this he's 72 years old. He was in the movie Over the Top, okay? The guy is a New York legend in some way. And his hand and wrist are unbelievably solid.
Yeah.
You can't move him, okay?
Wolverine.
Everybody here that comes to our practice that's gripped up with him can't move him.
Yeah.
All right? So he looks at me and I'm like, I don't know why he tells me I even have a chance or whatever, but he sees something in everyone and he tells you, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. So last time he was here, 2 times ago, he told me, yeah, you know what you got to do? You got to find a ball that you can squeeze and hold, not too hard. And you got to hold it.
Right.
And just squeeze that for your fingers.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, for my fingers, because my fingers suck. Everybody can roll me out.
Yeah.
So I found this ball the other day.
Yeah.
At a pet store. Because I was... So
it's a dog ball.
So Deborah is going to get cat food, right?
Yeah.
She's in there for like 20 minutes. I'm like, I got to go in there, see what's going on. So she's doing this thing because, the cat we need to figure out what food this cat's going to eat and stuff like that. So she's looking in there and I'm like, all right, she still needs 5 more minutes. Let me hang around here, look around. I'm like, oh, whoa, look at all these dog balls. So now I'm starting thinking, I've been trying to find a ball for over a month, but I haven't been actively looking. So I'm gripping all the balls on the wall and I found this one and I'm like, whoa, that one feels like it's just the right size. So I've had it for like 3 or 4 days now.
Yeah.
And I grip it and I hold it.
Yeah.
And I act like I'm at the table and I squeeze it. And then
your forearm's getting pumped up right there.
I know. I feel it all the way to my chest right now.
Shit.
And I'm fucking squeezing. I'm deciding which finger is applying the most pressure.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it like I'm holding someone else at the table. And I'm pulling and dragging. And then my abs are working now.
Yeah.
And then eventually... I'm like, okay, that's enough. And then I'll do the other hand. And we just did this earlier where I was like, do this. And we both did it. And then I said, now let's shake hands. And our grip was like, bow.
Yeah.
I did that to Deborah yesterday. I said, here, squeeze this thing.
Cup.
Go for it. And I'll do it. And I said, now we're going to shake hands. And I said, just pay attention to what our grip strength feels like. And I barely did anything. I just shook her hand firmly. Yeah. And she was like, ow. And I was like, you see that?
Yeah.
I was like, that's just from that stupid thing.
Yeah.
So I finally found the thing that Jack was telling me I need to do. And I'm going to try to do this every day twice. I think that's the correct amount. And the cool thing is because it's a ball, you can always end up squeezing it harder and harder. So as you get stronger, you're actually squeezing it harder and harder. And then eventually people are going to get on the table with you and go, holy shit, your fingers, how the fuck did you do that? And this is all it is. It says chuck it.
Chuck it.
Ultra.
A friend of mine is a busser at a restaurant.
Right? Oh, yeah.
He's got fucking strong hands.
Right.
Dude's from Mali. Super strong cat. You know what I mean? He's like my height. He's not this big dude, but he's got strong forearms and hands. Because you're carrying around a bus bin full of fucking plates.
Exactly.
And you're like maneuvering through a busy restaurant and you're bringing it into the kitchen, you're loading the thing up, and you're doing it walking with it fast.
That's riser.
Yeah. And it's like everything just has to work. And you're not thinking about like, okay, this is here, this here. It's like, it's just functional.
You're just doing your job.
And you know that if you do it in an uncomfortable way, it's not going to be, not going to be able to do this night after night after night after night for your whole life, right?
Right. So now,
he finds a way, and it's like everything's just like strong. I gripped up with him, and he can still take me down, right-handed.
Amazing.
Yeah,
just from sheer strength.
Yeah, I could hold him in the left, but he also, he's seen some videos of guys arm wrestling.
So he also
folds over.
Is
and
not
he's
a
like,
technique.
oh, shit.
Yeah.
But he did know to use his body. Which was
Uh-huh.
enough. The dude's big enough that he could, has a strong enough hand, and he just used his body. I was like, oh, okay, see ya.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, you do that. Like, that's another thing I didn't mention. It's just in your 4 months, you got so strong so fast that you beat me every fucking time if I allow you to get into position where I just can't do anything about it. Yeah. And then you have this thing where I don't know if I could describe it right, where you will pull me over to your side and then just drop down and I'm done. Like I can't fight out of it. I have to slip out of it.
Right.
But then that doesn't mean anything because now we got to use a strap.
Right.
And I better have a better strategy now because now you're just going to take me down, except we're going to be tied together. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. Well, it's funny because when you access what you've got, then I have no chance, right?
Yeah.
If you can get that initial thing, just get me at here, then it's really hard for me to get out of there. But if I can catch that, then you can get tired out.
Right.
And then I can hang out for a second.
Yeah.
That's what you mentioned in the text message. I always look so stoic.
Right.
That's like I'm literally just trying to maintain some energy.
Mm-hmm.
There are times it's funny when you're holding like this that you almost feel like you can relax every other muscle in your body except that arm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, do that. Hit the reset button. And then the whole thing. And then you can access some strength there.
Mm.
It's kind of like this strange, like wiggle one eyebrow at a time thing. It's like the whole body's relaxed except for this, well, just to let yourself regain composure a little,
You just reminded me one of the first things I learned when I started doing this is that like when you go to a gym and you're focusing on biceps curls.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is like specific.
I wouldn't know. I've never been to a gym.
But like,
and I have now.
Right. But like now that you've done certain movements where you're like, oh, okay, well that's this and that's this. And don't think about other things that are unrelated.
Yeah. Right.
You're only doing this movement with those muscles. So with arm wrestling, what you find out is that when you're doing something like a riser and you're trying to top roll and you're holding your opponent in that position, but you're not cupping and you're not doing down pressure, that means you're resting those muscles that you're not using.
Right.
So that once you get tired in this position, you can switch to the other ones and keep trying to go between the two sets of muscles so that you can outlast your opponent.
Yeah. And if you can do that little bit of that tennis match of like this.
Yeah.
And then you can find a hole and then exploit it.
Yeah.
But you got to be willing to play that game a little bit.
Yeah, well, you have to, once again, have super high, fine awareness of identifying the weaknesses.
Right.
And then how do you attack?
Because that's the only way I've beaten people. It's clearly not from raw strength or from experience.
Well, that's the name of the game.
Finding these little holes.
Yeah, that's all we're doing is finding those weaknesses.
Yeah.
It's not strength for strength.
Right.
Because then it's kind of like, that would be boring. Like I said, like the guys who come.
It would just be chess.
They don't show up later because they're like, well, I'm not strong enough. It's like, well, you kind of don't understand 80% of arm wrestling. So I think that's why you're not showing up. Maybe learn a couple of things, know?
That's funny that this notion of making it to practice a second time.
Yeah, right.
That is, then you're golden, right? Third time is the same as the second time, but it's about getting over that first, just like, my God, my arm hurts so much after this. It's like, oh, these guys are so strong. When you first get there, you assume everybody there is a pro.
Right.
Well, they are not pros. They're just like you. They were a beginner at some point too. And they're like, now they're better at it,
Yeah.
But come to the second practice,
Well, yeah. So what's the hardest? Is it the second practice or is it the fifth practice?
I think on the 20th practice, when some guy shows up to his first practice and kills you.
Right.
I think that's
the one that I was talking about.
That's probably the
one where I go, everyone goes home and I'm like, why am I doing this again?
But that's just reality. People have different, anatomical situations.
Well,
and
I'll tell you, in that circumstance, what you have to remember is you're thinking about it wrong if you're pessimistic and depressed about it, because you got to also remember what Devin says.
Right.
And even though you're not Devin, only Devin is Devin, the truth is, what you will realize for real is that every single person you group up with, all of them stronger than you, just the fact that you did group up with them, you will take something from them.
Yeah, totally.
And they know that. So they're willingly giving you.
Yeah.
So it's like they're all such benevolent benefactors.
Yeah, totally.
by saying, yeah, I'll give you something.
Yeah.
And you walk away with like not humility. You walk away with, thank you for giving me some of that because now I've taken it and now I'm going to grow with it.
I mean, this is what Mike Tyson was why he, I mean, I think he was unbelievable, right? But not only that he was technically the greatest boxer, right? But he was really looking at it like this was a benevolent project. It was like, we're in the ring together doing this art, you know, like we're bettering each other. And they were, I think there was one, they were both Muslim in the ring. And he was like, this was like a exaltation. You know what I mean? That match, right? It was so much bigger than just him or winning or the belt or whatever the hell it is, right? He was like, this is so much bigger than all that. This is like a gift that we've been given. And now we're giving a gift to the people that are the spectators, right? That's very artistic. And I dig that, you know? And that's the thing. If I can feel some sense of mastery on the table eventually, you know, whether it's in a year or 20, you know, and then also just like make it like some kind of truly good project where it's like, yes, we have some people together and we're going to get stronger and it's like a fun thing we can do together. And maybe we're like different religions, maybe we like different music. All great because we're all both on the table doing this fun little, you know, betterment.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. There's so many other things, but like one of the things that's beautiful about it is I was talking to my friend Carl, who I've known for many years, and he was friends with Ram Dass, and he would hang out with him in Hawaii, and he's in Hawaii now, I think, at Ram Dass's place now that he's passed. And he's got a different perspective on things based on the kind of people he hangs around lately and what he does. And I spoke to him a few months ago, and we haven't seen each other in a while. And I was talking about how I'm doing this arm wrestling thing. And he's, you know, coming from the perspective of what he does, which is like trying to be good to people and help others and be that guiding light without letting ego come into it. And it's just like people, you know, just giving. It's giving and serving. The thing that these yoga people talk about, which is like they're so full of shit, but they use the right words, but they just don't know how to do it.
Right.
So then I'm like, you know, that's really interesting. You know, I said, I do arm wrestling here at home every week. And I said, that's what it's like for us. I said, you know what it is? This arm wrestling thing? I said, because I just said the word arm wrestling, and I think you are hearing it and you're like, arm wrestling, just like everyone else. I said, but you know what it is? I said, I meet people and they're new and there's no judgments on anyone that comes in. We're just here for the same thing. They're seeking, I'm giving.
Right.
And it ends up being a community, a brotherhood.
Totally. Yeah.
And no matter who you're facing on the other side of that table, when you're pulling hard or talking about what you should do and what you can do and what you shouldn't do and how this works and what you've learned, all you're doing is the two of us are mentally focused on the one thing that is not him and not me.
Right. Totally.
It's the arm wrestling.
Right.
And it's the thing that they say when you need to focus on something to meditate. And like when they say, if you can just focus on the lotus.
Yeah. And you get the ego
on
death. Right.
I'm like, that's what we're doing.
Totally.
Except we're arm wrestling.
Right.
And people don't know that we're doing it. And sometimes we don't know that we're doing it. It's just happening.
Totally.
And we keep doing it. And we meet every week and we're like, hey, what's up? Can we do that thing again? It's awesome.
It's funny what you said about that the intense concentration. That is how you access that ego death thing that everyone talks about with certain drugs or with meditation, right? Every good musician accesses this all the time. In fact, we all access it when we watch an enthralling movie.
Right.
You don't think about your existence,
your
brain in your head. You disappear completely. And all of a sudden, all that matters is Jason Bourne making it over that fucking ledge. And as if that's real life. And it's like, that is all that exists at that point. You don't exist anymore. All it exists is like the Titanic is fucking sinking. And like, why isn't Jack getting onto the fucking door. It's like,
Right.
like that's all that matters. It's like, but that intense concentration that you are overwhelmed with your current activity is really cool in a movie, right? It's cool when you're making music, but all of those things you can access by yourself, right? You don't need another person watching the movie with you.
Right.
And with music, you can make music by yourself.
Yeah.
You can, period. People that think music is only a communal thing are wrong. You can absolutely sit and make music.
Yeah. Well, why
highest
can't
level
you?
by yourself.
Right.
But you can't arm wrestle by yourself. It's impossible.
Right.
You can't box by yourself.
Right.
That's why I think these guys that play that do athletic things at a high level, they really experience this crazy camaraderie, right? A very primal connection with another human being, right? Where you're doing this thing, arm wrestling, or you're playing baseball as a team, right? And they always say, these guys like Alex Rodriguez that are, playing for their own stats. I don't know if he was ever actually doing this, but, I don't know the guy's soul. But people, people say that the guy was driven by his own greatness, not the team, right? I don't know how true that is, but they say that about that guy. I love that guy. He's a brilliant baseball player, right? But in a team sport, I guess it's easier to get away with your ego. But if it's just two people, it has to disappear, and you have to your concentration level is so high on what you're doing. There's literally not enough room in your consciousness for your ego if you're concentrating hard enough, properly.
Yeah, so then that becomes effortless.
Totally.
So that's that when they say
that's the effortless mastery.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, shit. Let's end it there, man. Much. Let me ask you one last question on our way out. If you were to describe in as few words as possible what arm wrestling is, what would you say?
Arm wrestling is well, I mean, there's a lot of different routes, right, and points that I could make. But arm wrestling, for someone that's really trying to figure out what this is, if they don't know anything about it, arm wrestling is a combat sport that you don't get punched in the face.
Hopefully, yeah.
I mean, I like to think of it that way, that it's like, this is a combat sport at the end of the day. Like, it's this thing you're doing together, but one person wins, the other person loses. That's the combat, right? There's no draw. And that's really kind of, if you're only going to work towards a draw, then this isn't really it's not totally the point, right? So it's a combat sport, but it's like by definition, a hand-to-hand. I like that. It's like a contact combat sport that you don't get punched in the face, and that's really nice.
Yeah, I like that.
That's good.
That's a really good.
Because table tennis is a combat sport too. Like, one person wins, one person loses, but you got a ball, a racket, and a table between you. Right?
Well, I think combat sport. I think you can only call something a combat sport is if there is physical contact between the two. So,
right.
I think in table tennis it's indirect.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's a ball racket sport. It's different. Yeah. Yeah, this is like a true combat sport.
Right.
And you don't actually need a table either. You can just do this on a rock, on a boulder if you want to, Find a position. You can do this anywhere. You can box anywhere. You can just get in a boxing match. You can get a fight with somebody. Anywhere.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I like that.
So this is a kind of more refined combat sport.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with something that's also a short explanation that kind of encompasses as much as I can in as few words. I'm trying to think what it was that I said. It was something like this. Arm wrestling is a physical strategy game within the tight confines of a tabletop with certain rules.
Yeah.
Where you have to win with the application of overwhelming speed and power over your opponent's weakness.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of how I would say it. And, there's many ways to say what it is, but like, if I just said that that's what it is in a nutshell. Then you can extrapolate. Okay, well, what do you mean exactly?
Physical chess.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Chess
it totally
is a combat sport of just the mind, right?
Right. Yeah.
Then there are techniques, there are strategies that have already been figured out. There's chess theory.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, every human being still is only a human being. We're not Deep Blue. We're not Alpha Zero. We don't have perfect chess figured out. So at the end of the day, it's still like an intellectual combat sport between two humans.
Yes. So if you think of arm wrestling real quick, some people win within a second, right? That's a chess match.
Yeah, totally.
Done in a second. So you start with your pawns and you get to the king.
Yeah.
And it's like...
Yeah, you can checkmate in 3 moves if the other person just doesn't know that trick.
Right.
It's a famous one, you know? You bring your bishop out like this, and it's like you got them to move their... I forget what they call it, but yeah, it's a 3 or 4 move checkmate from white.
There you go.
Yeah.
That
That's
sounds
the
like
same thing.
sounds like arm wrestling.
Yeah.
Figure that out on the table.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never heard anybody talk about that, even though Devin talks about chess a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That concludes episode 8 of All Things Arm Wrestling.